lived in a utopia where currency was just being nice to people, and you just say nice things about people.
And with money, we can buy social capital.
Well, I guess you can't buy... Yeah, you can buy a certain amount. I was about to say you can't buy enough to make yourself the president, but you know what? At that point, you don't fucking need to, right?
That's how you become president, right? Well, no, I guess you have to be rich first.
Yeah.
So, that's a whole complicated, confusing
being
thing.
Bloomberg rich didn't make him president, but
No.
it did stop the guy who was going to tax him heavily from being president, so we'll see how that all works out.
You think Bernie doesn't have a shot now?
I desperately hope he does. I'm voting for him, but I mean, and I'll vote for Biden very unenthusiastically, but...
Surprised by how well Bernie did, actually. Like,
In those
for
first
some
states?
reason...
I was not surprised that he did well. I think that
I think I just got really pessimistic after, the
totally.
events of yesteryear.
Yeah. Well, and how poorly he did in 2016, but...
Yeah, no, that's what I...
He didn't do poorly in 2016.
Well, he
didn't do good enough.
Right, yeah. I mean, in this one, I thought that he was going to be, hands down the one, him or Warren. I just figured the world was, the country was ready for that sort of reform, but, and I get where people are like, how does it work? It's, be hard to implement, whatever. Those are valid points. I read a fairly compelling thing about how, Jeff Bezos is worth $140 billion or whatever, but it's not like he has that sitting in his savings account. So
No, that's the value of Amazon.
Exactly. So that's the value of his 12% of Amazon.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do you tax somebody on their their appraisal value?
Literally what he would have to do is sell off what he owns in Amazon every year to pay the taxes.
Is that the actual policy, or is that what people are saying would be the conclusion?
Well,
or is that what?
Where else is he going to get the money? If they're taxing him, at 1% of his net value.
And now we've segued into
bulk of that
politics.
is, yeah.
Well, no, I'm
And at that point, maybe some people want him to stop owning that much of Amazon. I think that's dumb, but whatever.
Well, your net worth is pretty high because you own property. So at some point,
I also have a lot of debt on that property.
That's true. So. But say if you in 15 years you own 4 different places and they're all yours.
Right.
Are you gonna have to sell a house to pay your taxes one year?
If the wealth tax applied to me, then yes.
I don't think that.
I don't think the wealth tax will ever apply to you, though.
That's true.
I mean,
yeah.
I hope it does. But the thing is,
you hope I get that much money?
The wealth tax is for people who never don't have to ever worry about being poor, or okay, if they
not just being poor, never having to be normal again.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's possible to blow through $200 million, but at that point, then you just fucked up.
There's a certain amount of money that I feel like is just too much money for a person to have, and maybe that's. I don't think this is very.
I think of it.
This is much more of an emotional response, and I haven't really thought deeply about it. I mean, but from my emotional, a reactive part of me is just okay, nobody who has the wealth tax apply to them. No one has that much money or gets to complain about.
So I mean, yes, basically I agree in terms of how we think of money in the day-to-day scale, but I don't. Once you get a certain level of money doesn't mean that anymore. Money is not a thing that is how your life changes. Money is now a resource for how you want to affect the world. So once you have that level of money, you start using it in ways to shape the world in ways that you think are better. And basically what we're doing is saying to people, we don't want you to shape the way of the world. We want the government to shape it instead.
Yeah.
So we're taking that power from you.
Well,
Which I kind of am 100% behind that.
Right,
if I had $1 trillion, I shouldn't be allowed to buy all the politicians I want and just protect all of my own personal interests at the expense of everybody else.
You don't have to buy politicians, but I would
but
much
people
rather.
Do. That's what's going on, right?
The really shitty part is how cheap they fucking are.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. You see some of the campaign donations. It's what, $75,000?
I know.
What the hell is going
nuts.
on?
But no, what I mean is I would much rather that Elon Musk have $100 billion to shape the future of the world than for Donald Trump to have $100 billion for it.
But because you don't get to pick,
unless you don't get to pick your politicians either.
Well, you sort of get to pick them.
Do you?
You get more control
about any politician.
I put sorta in quotes.
Are you happy about any politician that is running the country right now?
I mean, running the country, we've got the one. If I'm picturing
the whole group of all of
people,
Congress people, yeah.
Oh, I like Alexandria Cortez.
Okay.
I think she's fantastic. I think she's the bizarro Trump.
And how much say did you have in getting her into her position?
Nothing. She's in New York.
There is, I think, maybe two Congress people that I think are mostly okay. And I just, I really trust, some, I don't want to say the word trust, but I would rather that money be in the hands of someone who has some experience using the money and who is not beholden to the interests that politicians are beholden to.
If I got to push my power to Elon Musk and not just whoever happened to have more money than him who got to shape the world instead.
Yeah.
I feel like if we were just to like, hey, let's let the people with the most financial power run the world, we're probably setting ourselves up for a disaster because there's more bad people with big money than good people.
Yeah, you tend to get money by defecting, I think. Like, to get, like, large amounts of money.
I don't think that's true anymore.
I mean, I think it's still definitely true. I don't think it's always the case, but I don't think that it's...
Under capitalism, for the most part, people get really rich by creating great deals of wealth for society. And
you're talking about
mostly
the US,
when,
though.
Yeah, in the US, it's mostly when the government interferes and starts using force and violence that you expropriate money in bad ways.
Did you see the SMBC about, like, becoming part of the system?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it encapsulated, because you expressed a thought like that to me like a year ago, and it was kind of spot on. All right. We had I guess I was going to like try and segue us into the podcast, but I can't remember how we're going to, I'll let someone else do that.
Insert segue here.
Insert segue.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. We've already started, but this is the Bayesian Conspiracy, and you've been listening for a few minutes now. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm just Dickie. I hope you're still here.
We promise we're done talking about politics.
I had a moment last night recording with Brian. I was like,
okay, we don't promise. Sorry.
I was like, I can hear people unsubscribing, dude. Shut the hell up.
Nice.
What kind of sound does that make? It's like a slamming door noise.
Yeah, I was thinking like just like a whoosh.
Did you actually say that to him?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's staying in the show too. I can't remember what he said. It was something funny, so.
Cool.
I like Brian.
Yeah, no, he's great.
I appreciate having somebody there that like is pointing out like I know that I'm a fanboy. Oh, you know what? We're not doing the podcast.
No,
We're going to talk about Malcom Gladwell's Talking to Strangers, yes?
Yes, although we wanted to maybe this time get the sequences and a few feedbacks out of the way first so we don't run out of time. Do we want to try doing that this week?
Hey, that's something we could try. Let's experiment.
Okay. Everything's crazy this week. There was no official intro. Now we're doing things backwards. But before we jump into that, we are quickly going to talk about the coronavirus because that is a thing that everybody is talking about right now. As usual, rationalists are one step ahead of everything. So there were a couple weeks...
So none of us got sick, right?
Well, it's going to still happen. But, a couple weeks ago, people were already talking about, hey, this COVID-19 thing looks like it's going to be a big deal, and start asking what would this do to the markets if this turned into an epidemic, because it doesn't seem like people are panicking correctly. And several people in the community who had a lot of money in the markets sold some percentage in preparation. A lot of people started stocking up on basic necessities. And then, lo and behold, the thing does start spreading. Less than 1 week ago, literally less than 7 days ago, I was talking with my boss. And I was, just saying I'm kind of canceling all my going out, being with people plans. And he said, yeah, but we're not on the coasts. It's fine. We're safe here. And I looked at him and I said, Denver International Airport is a major hub. It's gonna be here. I didn't say any of the rest of this, but what the fuck was he thinking?
Yeah, anywhere where there's an international airport.
Yeah, there's people coming here from all over, all the time, in these giant tubes where they're breathing the same air as other people for 6+ hours, and then they stay in the hotels here. It's gonna get into every major city.
I tried to get Brian to commit to a bet with me at the meetup on Tuesday that we'd have a case in Denver by the end of the month because I was being super gentle with my guess.
And then we had a case 4 days later?
We had 2 cases on 3 days later on Friday.
3 days
Did
later.
you get money?
Yeah.
No, we didn't actually place a bet because he was like, oh, we'll have a case in a month. And I'm like, yeah, we will. So,
so what would be cool is if at airports, the TSA cared at least as much about spreading pandemics as they did about stopping terrorists. What if we screened people for infectious diseases?
They don't even care about stopping terrorists. They care about security theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it'd be one thing to stop somebody who clearly has a cold, but then Rachel sneezes 6 or 7 times a day. Actually, it would be 6 to 8 because she always double sneezes, and it's just allergies. Mm. She's done that every day for the last 25 years, right? So, in the same sense that we don't want our airport security personnel profiling people that look like terrorists, we don't want them profiling people who look sick. Like, we want them if you're clearly sick.
Yeah, okay, now I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, another, like, sort of tangent. Another thing that airport security loves to do is stop trans people.
Really?
It's like, Phoenix and I have made a joke about it now. Like,
why, do you guys look like terrorists or something?
no, because they have a gender button that they push before you go through the scanner thing, that if it notices something is off, then you get flagged, and then you have to get the pat down. And you have to awkwardly, like, now explain to an airport security person. It's like, yep, I've got a dick. I'm trans. Hello, airport. Hi.
Is that the just trans flying protocol, just like declaring what presenting genitals you have so that they aren't surprised on the scan? Because that sounds like the easiest way around it. Even if it's an uncomfortable question to answer, and, you know, have to answer it the way that they want to hear it.
I guess, like, for me, I just find it to be funny and exasperating, but some people find it to be incredibly invasive and triggering.
So, wait, why do they have to pat down all trans people?
No, I think it's like if you go in there and you say I'm a woman, and
no,
then
they
you go
look
in there,
at you. They don't ask you. They look at you. They make a judgment call. They push a button.
Yeah.
And so if you look like a woman, but then there's like something weird on this scanner, oh, this looks wrong, and then they've got to go like,
oh,
They're
why does this woman have?
they're packing something at waist level, and then they're like, well, hold on a second.
or like me with
Perfect
a binder.
place for explosives. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
I wonder if anyone's ever tried to be a terrorist and like stick a bomb in their underwear and be like,
You know what? If you were really committed to it, you could have your testicles removed and put some explosives up there instead.
I don't know how big the
stop
explosives
helping the
could
terrorists.
It's true. You might have to be like in a vulnerable location on the plane.
I feel like there are easier ways to get things on board.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
there's much easier ways. People walk through with explosives all the time. Not real explosives, but fake
I
explosives.
walk through with scissors like every goddamn time. Like, I always, especially when I was
brought
still an art
mace on
student.
my last 2 flights on accident because it's my backpack.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can take down a plane with a pair of fingernail clippers, I can take down a plane with a can of mace.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off though.
No, I would feel like we should get back on whatever topic.
Right,
Topic
the
are we
whole
even talking about now?
coronavirus thing, or COVID-19, but coronavirus is just cooler, so I think that's sticking. Basically, avoid any large gatherings, definitely anything where there's more than 10 people in close proximity. I am basically not going out dancing or to any theaters for the next 2 to 3 months, which sucks, but whatever.
Do you think it'll be blown over in 2 to 3 months? Like that. So I bring that up because my manager, I think, takes his cues from idiot politicians and not scientists on like the level of how to be concerned here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this isn't going to go away in April.
So
right?
2 months is my minimum lower bound right now. And as we get, further on, if it needs to be extended, I'll extend it.
I think that there's a great chance this will just be with us for the next few years.
Okay.
I think that there will be people with coronavirus running around on Earth for,
like
through
SARS
the
is
decade.
still around.
Yeah. But will it still be rampant is maybe the question or the concern.
Well, it's more a matter of whether we find a way to treat it and contain it effectively, to maybe vaccinate against it. There's a lot of clinical trials right now. It's just pandemics, one of the scary things about them is just that you're new, you don't really know like how to fight them yet. And learning that is like the key to finding the antigen and then like finding ways to treat it, keep it under control versus having it spread, having it losing your herd immunity.
So key things is don't panic. Obviously, it's not going to kill most people that are listening to this podcast, although I'm sure there are some immunosuppressed people listening to us. So they'll be at high risk. We want to get past the initial outbreak hump. It's not going to be like one of those post-apocalypse movies, but the economy will likely take a hit for a little while.
I'm refinancing my house.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm down 1.1%.
Oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'll lower my mortgage by like $180 a month.
Yeah, maybe take advantage of it if you see opportunity.
If you're in a major metropolitan area, there's a good chance that sometime in the coming months, the government is going to ask you to stay indoors as much as possible for a few weeks. So when you get a chance, go out and stock up on some food. Like, seriously, rice doesn't take a lot of space and is a lot of calories. So you can just grab some rice and maybe some frozen chicken, get enough food to last you for 2 weeks if you need to.
My thing, like, I don't know. I have a number of thoughts on, man. All right, I'll try and make this quick because this isn't the crux of the episode. So, like, I am not super concerned about dying because I'm in the age demographic where very, very few people have died, which is great. I never go out to clubs anyway, so I'm not losing that part of my life. But like this morning, I went to Einstein and got a bagel.
God
like,
damn it.
So like
killed us all.
But who knows what they've been up to, right? So like, unless I completely shut myself off, it's not just about not going to crowded, disgusting places. It's like, don't go anywhere.
Right.
So like, am I supposed to do that?
That is the thing that you might need to do for a few weeks.
Right. But am I supposed to do that now, starting for the next 90 days?
No, I don't think right now.
Yeah. So it's
needed.
Yeah. I don't know. Like
I already see people like, the touch screens at King Supers for your self-checkout. They either use something wrapped around their finger or they like use the back of their hand to touch it, stuff like that.
Also,
you don't want to
I've been
touch
using the back of my
shared
knuckles for those
surfaces.
touchscreens for years.
Oh, okay.
So something frustrating is that Clorox and Lysol wipes are sold out everywhere. Like, you can't get them on Amazon.
Yeah, I can't find Purell. Yeah.
It's really hard to get the masks now.
Well, it's great. Well,
The N95 masks.
Yeah, and this is the next thing that people always say. So just to rehearse the cast thought, leave those for the professionals, the environments where they're actually useful.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to use the same mask every day, all day. And if you steal 90 of them from your local doctor's office, then then the people who are sick won't be able to have them.
They're
they
more
can get
useful
more.
for keeping other people from getting it if you are sick.
Yes.
My main concern is like both my parents have been smoking for 40 years. My grandma's in her late 80s. They're all three of them are in very high risk demographics.
Yeah.
And that stresses me out.
Are they people that go out a lot and interact with other people from like various,
Not really. Like, but I mean, all my grandma's friends are in her age demographic. They go to the doctor's office because they're all old.
Yeah.
And so, sick people with coronavirus go to the doctor's office and, cough on all the doorknobs because they're a bunch of fucking heathens. The best thing about, like, me is I'm not changing really any of my daily habits because I've been politely germophobic for, several years. So, like, I'm always cautious about doorknobs. I always have Purell on me. Like, I'm not over the top, I don't think. It doesn't impact my daily life in a negative way, but like I'm conscientious about these things. And it's like, yes, now finally everyone's being told to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Stop fucking coughing into your hands like a bunch of goddamn animals.
I'm not a prepper. I think someday maybe we should have a quick episode on just basic stuff that everyone should have. But unless you are completely strapped for space, I think everyone should have at least a week's worth of calories in their house at all times. Like if you start dipping below a week, go out, get more. And there's almost no one in America who can't go 1 week without eating and they're going to die. But yeah, you don't want to be starving for, a number of days if you can help it. It's not healthy. It makes it harder to fight off viruses.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, my main concern is people that I know getting sick.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, my grandma, her social group, they all go to the doctor all the time. I mean, they don't go clubbing, but my mom works in a position where she interacts with dozens of strangers a day. At a dentist office, so all of them have their mouths open all day, right? When they're in the office, it's, I don't know. My dad probably thinks he's too cool to wash his hands properly, so like they're, so my concern is all of the people in high risk groups that I don't want to get sick, but yeah.
Aren't you going to visit your parents after this?
I am.
Sounds like a risky thing to do, sir. Yeah.
I'll explain later.
You can't. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't completely alter life for something like this. Plus, they're in Fort Collins, so they're in a lower risk area.
Yeah, it sucks because like I'd like to visit my grandma. It'd be silly for me to like, I don't know. I'm torn on that. What do you guys think I should do? Because
I don't know. I keep hearing like if you really care for your loved ones, don't visit them.
Especially the people that are in their 80s.
Call them. You cannot transmit coronavirus over the phone.
Yet. Wait till it takes
Growth
off.
mindset.
Yeah, COVID-20 will be over the phone. COVID-21 over text, and we'll all be dead in 3 days.
I'm a little bit worried about working in a hospital.
Yeah, that's worrisome.
The hospital's doing a really good job of, they were way prepared and...
Is it a general hospital or just for cancer?
Well, I work in the cancer center, but it's a general hospital. Okay. It's got like a bunch of buildings together for... There's, the research department. There's for some reason, what is it? Physical therapy office, children's hospital.
As long as I'm complaining about the government, did you see how the CDC fucked up the testing kits? Oh, yeah. Making it illegal to administer any testing kits that weren't from them directly?
The CDC, it was the FDA, right?
Or maybe it was the FDA. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might have actually been overturned.
I'm getting the two of them confused. Yeah, after 2-3 weeks of delays.
Yeah.
Turns out also you cannot sell a number of things on eBay like filter masks anymore because apparently the prices were like quadrupling and that may run afoul of government anti-gouging laws. So now you just can't buy them at all, which is, Even better. It's like the government doesn't understand that price is a signal to suppliers to supply more of this thing.
That's hilarious. I mean, it's both funny and or it's both funny and not funny.
Yeah.
I think most of my thoughts.
These are not the people who want to have extra money.
Yeah. I mean, as far as prepping for things, I probably have a week's worth of calories in the house. I never buy bottled water, but I was at Costco a couple days ago and I saw people coughing, which is great. And it was like $5.75 for 40 bottles of water. Yeah. So I bought 40 bottles of water, and they're now going to hang out in my pantry for, ages. It's also like this, under the stairs cabinet thing, so it's not taking up valuable space. Yeah. But I was like, this is like cheaper than, this is almost like as cheap as tap water.
Yeah.
Like $6. So, I mean.
Actual tap water is as cheap as tap water, and you can get 15-gallon water containers super fucking cheap off Amazon or anywhere.
Yeah. And then, a little bit of
just fill them up.
Disinfectant or whatever to keep it from getting stagnant.
The disinfectant is like $20 for 50 tabs.
I have like no concern about the water turning off.
Me neither.
I just figured like, hey, now I've got bottled water.
Yeah,
and
like,
it was the kind of thing that people were, I saw people walking out with palletfuls of bottled
water. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn.
I think Scott Alexander pointed out that Amazon is still delivering in Wuhan.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think civilization is going to collapse. It's just going to be like, there's some precautions that you could still take while not also freaking the fuck out and thinking that it's the end of the world.
Amazon is a service you can trust.
Although they were saying probably disinfect your packages.
And open them outside.
Yeah, with gloves. Oh man, I'm on this clinical research memes Facebook group, and somebody posted a picture of a bunch of flu masks that they had gotten that were from Wuhan. Like, should we open these? Like, look what we just got. Look where they're from.
I don't know. All right, should we go on to the strong post?
Yeah.
Or was there more Corona stuff to say?
I'll just say that basically I think all the fun stuff, I guess I'd take it in this order. I'd read the Slate Star Codex post.
Yeah, we'll link that.
Which is fun. I put a note on that already. And then there was a Last Week Tonight episode on this too. So if you want the comic relief version, that one's also valuable.
Cool.
Basically his thing is find the golden mean between like licking posts in the subway and chugging bleach.
Ooh.
So, between those two extremes, find a happy spot.
Yeah, you can actually drink a little bit of bleach. Like
take that with a grain of salt. Rather, don't take your bleach with anything. Sorry, how much bleach should you drink?
You can look it up, but like if you dilute it a certain amount, it's one of the like things that you can use as a survivalist tactic.
To clean your water.
Bleach tablets.
If you're drinking bathtub water, maybe throw a cap full of bleach in it or something, right?
Well, make sure you know what the dosage is first.
Yeah, so find that out, but don't take a little mini shot of bleach in the morning to try and keep yourself from getting sick. That's what John Oliver was getting at.
Okay.
Of course, to him it was a picture of a guy with an upside down bottle of bleach just pouring it into his face. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then there is a Discord group called Social Distancing. Created in the Berkeley rationalist area because they've got some cases there. People are worried about it. People who are socially distancing themselves can join this for tips on prepper stuff, and then also just updates and socialization if you're just going to be stuck in your house. I'll see if maybe there's a shareable link that I can get, or if not, I'll see about how you can get involved in that.
Cool.
I happen to just be added one day because I have people that I know in the Berkeley area, and I think we're just mass inviting people.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right. So, jumping along to the less wrong posts. First one we have today is update yourself incrementally. Does anyone want to launch into this?
It's okay if your cherished belief isn't perfectly defended. If the hypothesis is that the coin comes up heads 95% of the time, then 1 time in 20 you'll expect to see what looks like contrary evidence. Yet, it is widely believed, especially in the court of public opinion, that a true theory can have no failures, and a false theory no successes.
Yes. So, you find people holding up a single piece of what they think of an evidence and claiming that their theory can explain it, as though this was all the support they needed. And apparently, a false theory can have no supporting evidence. So, I guess we run into this a lot with... not a lot anymore, but we ran into it a lot with 9/11 truthers, right?
Oh yeah, like a lot of conspiracy theories are people just anomaly hunting.
Yeah.
Well, what about this?
Yeah.
Well, what about this?
How do you explain that? Well, my theory can explain it, so it can't be a false theory.
It's just people are very uncomfortable with saying that that's a coincidence. That's also a coincidence, and it's like kind of, linking back to the anthropic principle episode we had last time. We're hardwired to look for causality as a species.
And I think the important thing to, like a rationalist technique to apply to, in the case of especially anomaly hunting and conspiracy theories, is like if you didn't predict it in advance, that I don't know what all the coincidences that they point to in the 9/11 stuff, but like if your model didn't have that already in advance, then you weren't modeling this at all. You were just like
you're just
after
post
the fact
facto
nitpicking,
pointing at weird things and going, oh, what about that? That's something that I've seen brought up recently with some shoddy science, where there's a bunch of ways you can do science bad, and something that is getting more attention lately that I'm pretty happy about is people pointing out that you did not theorize this ahead of time. So people will do, I don't know, it's like a study about asthma, and they didn't have any kind of hypothesis ahead of time. It's just then, like, after the fact, they're looking at it and being like, oh, look, it looks like, I don't know, you can skew the data this way to make it look like the drug that we're testing helped in these ways. And it's like, did you predict that was the thing that this drug was going to do? If no, then, like, that's useless.
And I think one of the things that is stressed throughout this post is that beliefs generally shouldn't be binary on-off. A theory is either true or false, that they should be held with a certain probability, like 95% confidence that this coin comes up heads 95% of the time, something like that. Because one of the things that he mentions is that even with a correct model, if it is not an exact model, you will sometimes need to revise your belief down. If an iota or two of evidence happens to counter-support your belief, that's okay. Just shift your belief downward a little. If it's true, supporting evidence will come in shortly and the probability will climb again. If the theory is false, you didn't really want it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've found myself getting really uncomfortable with that, like, or rather, I've, like, caught myself and tried to fix it, but, darn, there was a recent example, but I can't think of it. But, when, oh, no, I remember it. About, Roundup. So, I was getting really frustrated with people talking about that, like, Roundup being toxic. And I looked it up at the time, and I was like, no studies have shown that Roundup is toxic. The mechanism of action doesn't even make sense for it being toxic. It, like, deletes an enzyme from a plant that lets it photosynthesize. You don't photosynthesize. But, last night I was, like, having this argument with people, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is a big pet peeve of mine. And somebody said, well, actually, there have been some studies recently that had a possible connection to carcinogenicity. So I was like, all right, show me. And then they did, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now
like,
you get to revise slightly. Yeah, in the downward direction.
But I like noticed myself wanting to like start defending my point.
Right.
So I didn't look dumb or something, and then it's like, oh, that's not a good impulse.
You did a good thing. You were a good rationalist.
Yay.
Congratulations. Yeah. He says that, well, the way he ends this post is that maybe some more counter support comes in just a tiny bit. So you rise down again just a little bit, and new upward support is slow to trickle in. You may find your belief drifting further and further downward, until finally you realize from which quarter the winds of evidence are blowing against you. In that moment of realization, there's no point in constructing excuses. In that moment of realization, you have already relinquished your cherished belief. So by, slowly just updating a little bit, you can get yourself to becoming less wrong without even having to have a major, existential struggle over it.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Yes. He did mention earlier up, which I didn't re-quote, but the rationality is not for winning debates, it is for deciding which side to join.
Oh yeah, that's a good line.
Yeah. If you've already decided which side to argue for, the work of rationality is done within you, whether well or poorly.
Yeah, it's worth noticing when you do have a position on something and you're not sure how you got that strong of a position on it, trying to trace your line of thinking backwards and being like, did I get this from first principles? Did I look this up? Or is this just something that I'd heard repeated by authority figures enough times or something like that? It's another thing I'm trying to notice too. Like,
I think that's part of the reason he tries to distance rationality from political stuff, or at least did at the time, because politics is much more about winning debates.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to figure out which side of the debate to argue from first, then that's a slightly different thing.
Yeah, well, I think that was mainly
was meant to be for.
I think that was mainly like politics is a really bad area to start in because we're just as a species so hardwired for tribalism.
Yeah.
It's better to and that was the other thing that I had forgotten about the politics is the mind killer, was that he actually says, like, this is for advanced rationalists, not we don't talk about politics around here at all ever. It's just more, if you're just new to this, you're just starting out, like, hone your skills in the areas of scientific fact, or, like, you know, something that's less stabbing directly into your soul first. Anyway.
No, and I think that's, I mean, I'm looking forward to the Politics is the Mind Killer series when we get there. They kind of come up
Didn't we already cover
sparsely. Yeah, but I think some of more of the points like keep coming up like that, and I like that admonition about, like, this isn't something that we can't not discuss. This isn't something that we just don't discuss. It's just like, this is a really shitty intro move, right? I mean, it's antithetical to a good approach for an outsider, right?
Yeah.
All right, let me
after having argued about politics 20 minutes ago.
Well, that's because
That's
I mean, we're also here having fun. Yeah, well, I was almost going to say that, but I'm not going to pat myself on the back like that. But what I will say is that, like, we're not. I mean, we well, A, I didn't know we were starting the episode.
No.
B, that was more a discussion among friends. And,
yeah.
Like, if I was trying to tell somebody, like, oh yeah, here's what this is about, and here's how it applies to your favorite candidate for president.
Oh,
like,
God, that'd be the worst
exactly,
idea.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, another thing I did want to point out with this one is I like when these posts get self-referential. This one said, this one linked to people wanting their debates to be one-sided, which is an earlier post, debate should not appear one-sided. What was that one titled?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that was the name, yeah.
Yeah, that's a benefit that you do get from reading the sequences in order.
Yeah, he covers previous concepts and
Yeah,
then
it
reuses
keeps
them
building on
forward.
them until you've got this much bigger model in your head than you started out with. That's why sometimes I do find it frustrating to, like, try to say that, like, oh yeah, there's this whole thing about how you shouldn't want your debates to be one-sided, and then I'll link the original post, and I'm like, this doesn't look as strong as I remembered it being. This just kind of seems like, well, there's also the thing
there was
where,
all
like,
this stuff building up to it.
yeah. It's hard to get all that context there. It's like, well, you really have to just read the sequence. That's a lot of text, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to bridge a very large inferential gaps and has to do a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Let's
Moving
move
on. Yeah.
One argument against an army. Suppose the country of Fredonia is debating whether its neighbor, Sylvania, is responsible for a recent rash of meteor strikes on its cities. The meteor struck cities close to the Sylvanian border. There was unusual activity in the Sylvanian stock markets before the strikes, and the Sylvanian ambassador, Trentino, was heard muttering about heavenly vengeance. And then you encounter some arguments by pro-Sylvania traders, again and again and again, but each time the new argument's handily defeated 3-1.
Can I really quickly interject?
Yes.
I cut out a part in the middle where it said that a pro-Sylvania trader, in quotes, approaches you and says, but look, it doesn't make any sense for the comet strikes to be the work of Sylvania because of this. And I don't know, they point out something from astronomy, right? Like, meteors are very, very hard for humans to direct. It would be basically impossible. And you go, yeah, but they all hit cities close to the border. And there was unusual activity in the stock market beforehand. And the ambassador did talk about heavenly justice just before this happened. So, I got my 3 points of evidence against your one that, like, we think humans don't know how to do this yet, but maybe they do. So I'm going to stick with my argument here because, it just seems there's more weight to this side.
Yeah, 3-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, by rehearsing the arguments you already knew, you're double counting your evidence.
Yeah, and then people keep coming to you with another argument. And each time you're like, yeah, but I got these 3 against your 1. And then someone comes with another one. And it says, and on every occasion, you feel yourself becoming more confident that Sylvania was indeed responsible, shifting your prior according to the felt balance of evidence.
Because it's 3-1 every time.
Yeah.
But by the end of the week, it's 30-3. But you're not thinking of it that way because you're not keeping score. This reminds me of a similar post where it was like a religious, like a intelligent design argument or something, and like every time they'd be confronted with a new piece of anti-information, they'd give back the intelligent design, spiel, and they'd be like, aha, I defeated another, and another, and another. I think it was just a similar point about, like, cognitive stop signs or something, but it's the same sort of failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he ties this back right into the previous post, which is why we grouped them together, saying that the balance of evidence may still support your cherished belief, but you still have to shift the probability down, yes, down, from whatever it was before you heard the contrary evidence. It does no good to just rehearse the supporting arguments because you have already taken those into account. So if someone does make a contrary point, even if you think it's not a good point and your points are, better and outweigh it, you still should adjust down just a little bit. So that if you keep getting all these little arguments over time, they can build up to, bring you to where a 30-3 should be.
Yeah. This reminds me of the arguments as soldiers, which I think we covered earlier too. This is the kind of mindset where you're not thinking about how to debate, like, factual facts correctly. You're thinking about, I've got these 3 magic items, and every time someone comes at me with a new magic item, I'm going to use these 3, and they keep working, so I'm just going to keep using them. Haha, I've got my 3 magic, but, like, it's, you're not trying to win a fight.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the point of what you're doing. Like, if you're actually trying to find out the truth, then that is just a very wrong way to think about how to do it.
So, speaking of wrong ways to think about how to do this, if I'm in dialogue with a moon landing denier, they will have, if they make a living out of it, like some people do, they'll have 4,000 arguments about why the moon landing was fake, and I've got like 3 about why it was real. So, like, for every one that I hear, I've got to update down a little bit in my confidence that the moon landing happened.
I mean, depending. First of all, if it's an argument with some validity, then yes, you probably should update down a little bit. Just how little that little bit is might be very little if it's really weak. But there's also some arguments that you can dismiss by actually looking at the argument.
Yeah.
Like looking at this and being like, no, this argument counts for 0 because it's so bad because of, reason X, Y, or Z. I think this is more like you cannot use the arguments you already know to be like, I see, maybe you have a point there, but I have all this other evidence on the other side, so I'm going to ignore that point. It has to be,
this is
if it is a somewhat valid point to take into consideration.
This is a particular analogy that's trying to get at the heart of why this style of trying to argue is not actually useful for getting towards the truth of something, but just because they're talking about the numerical error that some people make, that, like, there's also the point that this is, like, physically impossible for people to have done argument should actually win. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 to 3 arguments, like, oh, but it looks suspicious, versus this is physically impossible to have. Like, obviously that argument's going to defeat any other, like, but this is weird and isn't that weird, but you're like, this is still physically impossible. You could just keep using that argument, because...
Or if that moon landing denier has, like, extremely good evidence, one single piece of evidence could overrule everything else. You could be like, oh shit, you're right. Even if it's just one argument, if it's that good of an argument.
Yeah, this is much more valuable from the perspective of a moon landing denier with bad arguments, where they're like, well, the flag looks like it moves for a minute. And, like, if they just said that to every counterpiece, every piece of information about why you think the moon landing happened, they're like, but the flag moved a little bit, I think. So
of course it moved a little bit. They were planting it.
Well, but I mean that's one of the things that they say. It's like, flags don't wave in space. How did it blow in the wind? And it's like, it didn't. There was a supporting pole.
Yeah.
But, or like the dust. This would be like a good counterpoint to that. So like you say, like, well, yeah, but if you watch them jump, and then you watch the dust move at like 1/6 G. Like, what, they've got string to all that dust? Was this early CGI? Like,
yeah, that's another thing. Like, I remember people would say that the lighting looks like stage lighting, and they're like, yeah, the shadows are weird, the lighting's... I'm like, yeah, no shit, it's weird. The atmosphere is different. Like,
yeah, the lighting looks weird. It's on the fucking moon. Yeah, we don't have lights like that on Earth.
I think someone looked into how much it would cost Kubrick to, because they say Kubrick directed the moon landing, how much it would cost Kubrick to do those kind of special effects, and basically it would be impossible, but if it had been possible, it would be cheaper to go to the moon than it would be to fake the moon landing.
Yeah. Well, they brought rocks back. It's like, yeah, but, we've had meteorite strikes in Antarctica, and that could be moon rocks. And
yeah.
Like, yeah, come on.
Man.
That's That's actually something.
Yeah, but like if I go there, take pictures, and then bring back the
Right.
ones that I took pictures of, and it's like, oh, you just brought those to the set in LA, and it's like, no, come on, man. I don't know. I lost the I don't know if I ever had fun. Well, no, I must have for a couple of years had fun debating with like conspiracy theorists. But then it's just like arguing with with religious creationists or something. You hear the same arguments over.
They're
and
not
over.
arguing in good faith.
Yeah.
That's
And-
always so frustrating.
Yeah, it's more just like a spectacle sport. I think even for them, like I probably know people who are 9/11 truthers, but I don't know
Definitely is.
anyone that I have had that discussion with in like the last 10 years. But like if they really believed it, they seem to have like way too much fun with it. Then
Yeah.
it's like if you thought like, oh yeah, the things are really actually scary and nefarious like that.
No, I distinctly remember my sister at one point hearing some moon hoax arguments and deciding, oh, I'm going to be a moon hoaxer now too, because this is funny. Like she like just decided to say that she didn't believe the moon landing was real as a quirky part of her identity now that she could like argue with people about. But like not because she thought that any of the evidence was compelling, but more just because it like seemed like, oh, I could be a wacky eccentric moon person, and that's appealing to me.
I read a great article how it's a lot more about the community and the identity than about the belief itself.
Well, I mean,
the belief is a starting off point, but
people
then
could
once
say
you
the same
get-
thing about us in like AI.
I suppose.
But the difference, we're all perfectly sane. So.
Oh yeah. All right. Do we have more to say about that one?
No, he just ended it with saying, with the right kind of wrong reasoning, a handful of support, or even a single argument can stand off an army of contradictions. And thus the name of the post.
Yeah.
All right, so for next time, we will be talking about hindsight bias and hindsight devalues science, which is the names of the two posts.
Wonder if that was the thing I was talking about earlier about pre-registering your hypotheses.
No, this
It's
is
not.
this is something different.
I've read these before, but it was a long time ago. I'm enjoying this, like, doing the sequences, because I have not read these in years, and
Yeah.
some of these I just kind of, like, was trying to get through. I had, Rationality AI to Zombies, and I was kind of just blowing through them. So actually taking the time to look at each one and being like, oh, I see how these connect to these other ones now, or, oh, now I have all this new context where it's been brought up in these, like, newer Slate Star Codex articles about this thing, and, yeah, that's been cool.
Awesome.
I remember when we had Eliezer on the podcast back in the wee old days of the show.
Yeah.
And
Episode 6, I think.
yeah, and he liked the new format of Rationality from AI to Zombies because it's like more cohesive, and he's like, yeah, the other lesser on kind of turned into this big spaghetti mess of a wiki, and you're like, yeah, but I loved that part of it.
Yeah.
And it is kind of fun.
It's a different experience.
It is, but it's nice to have one of like, yep, I can find this here because I know it's in this section, and another one where it's just like, I'm gonna kind of just like go through these as they were in the train of thought that they were released, and that has its own
Or
sort of
click
fun
around.
value. Yeah.
I did a lot of like, I'd start off wanting to read one, and then there's a bunch of links like in the text to other posts, and then I'd click those, and then I'd click those, and the next, like, I always like right click and open things in new tabs so I can keep track of my history.
That's exactly what I did, and then you just get like 4 or 5 deep, and you're like, now I can finish the one I started.
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes you never finish it.
Right.
But that's also kind of fun because, I don't know, I also enjoy Wikipedia for that reason, where you can kind of just get lost down this rabbit hole of, that thing's cool, look at that shiny thing, wait, what about this?
I think I lost on 4 separate occasions an entire day to TV tropes.
I don't blame you. Man, I used to have the hardest time when I was trying to write fiction. If I'd end up on TV tropes or Wikipedia, like doing some research or trying to look out, it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, what was I doing? I was trying to be productive. Whoops. Even the thesaurus. I get lost in the thesaurus. I'm the worst.
Yeah. Well,
Ooh,
no, I
what's the
don't agree that
etymology
you're
of
the
this
worst.
word?
Yeah, right. But you're filling your brain with things which can later be stewed and turned into creative output. So
Yeah. One thing I do have to say is, I really am in strongly, like, it's weird. I feel like this contradicts things I've said before about, like, I guess education or whatever, but the weird, like, random skills that I've learned throughout my life have always come back and been useful. Or, like, random trivia knowledge really often comes back. So, enjoy learning. But, yeah.
Yeah, and if learning random stuff is fun for you, then it's a win-win. So, at the very least, you've just learned something, and that's just fun. So, at the end of the day, at least you can look back and say, at least I had fun.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to talk about Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Talking to Strangers.
heck and yes, let's do this.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I was trying to think of a segue between coronavirus and talking to strangers, and I just couldn't, like, as people probably know, Malcolm Gladwell's a popular nonfiction writer who It does pretty good work. It tends not to be like, I don't know, sometimes it's a bit more surface level than you might want if you're somebody in this community, but I really enjoyed talking to strangers. It was not what I expected. So
I think there's nothing wrong with the equivalent of like popular science books.
yeah, no,
You know?
I mean, what I find frustrating about them is often like, hey, here's a book about a subject that I care about. Say it's genetic engineering and it's made for like a lay person crowd, and then I'll get excited about it, but I'll start reading it and it'll do this like thing that feels like it's talking down to the audience the whole time, where it's like, you won't believe this. And like, you're not going to believe what I'm about to say, but trust me, when you get to chapter 3, and I'm like, no, I know, I'm flipping, like, get to the good shit.
I am going to believe you, it's fine.
After about 6 chapters, sometimes I'll just put a book down where it's like, I'm clearly not going to learn anything from this book.
I feel like, as long as I'm derailing you, the good way to do that is more like how Richard Dawkins wrote The Greatest Show on Earth, which really was my first, like, decent dive into evolution. And it wasn't so much more like, trust me, this, you're going to believe this, it's going to be crazy. It's more just like, no, we're going to take this.
You won't believe what happens on page 13.
Right.
It's like clickbait for your own book.
It just takes it in a really like nice order that will walk anybody from any perspective, as long as they can read, into understanding the basics of evolution.
Yeah.
And it does it in a, and I thought a fun way. I haven't read the book in like 10 years, but
definitely writing style has a lot to do with it, where like, I did know a lot of the stuff about evolution already when I was reading Dawkins' books, but his writing style was so enjoyable that I was enjoying reading stuff I already knew because it was kind of poetic.
He's clearly having fun, and I was going to say poetic too. He's big into poetry. He cites uses lots of verses and stuff. But
he helps you look at things that you already know from different angles, which is really useful as well.
Another big shout out for my favorite book of his, Unweaving the Rainbow, which is all about the poetry of science.
You like reconsuming things, right?
Yes. I'm currently doing a podcast on a book that I've read 5 times.
Right, okay. So how would you feel about maybe someday in the medium future rereading this book and then doing a episode, Bayesian Conspiracy episode on it?
I can just reread it and tell you guys if I think it's worth talking about.
Or sounds like it's worth talking about.
I mean, if anyone knows evolution, it's like you're not going to get much from it. Maybe you will.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll read
it sounds like you already knew evolution and you got a lot from it.
I knew less than I did before I started it.
Okay.
I was like 18, and public school in the U.S., even in a blue state or blue city, especially like Fort Collins, I mean, we wasn't very heavily taught.
Well, we can maybe put on a what do you call them, surveys on our Patreon.
Sure.
Have people vote.
Or, I mean, at the very least, I'll reread it for fun. It's been a while. All right, as long as I'm talking about the book. I got Richard Dawkins to sign that book when I met him at a conference once, so that was fun. Yeah. I think I got him to sign a book both times I met him. One time was Unweaving the Rainbow, and then one time it was this one because it was a hardback cover. Maybe actually he didn't. No, I don't think he signed Unweaving the Rainbow because I gave that to somebody who never got it back, and I would have chased that down if I really wanted it. So anyway.
Anyway,
our Docs was cool in real life. That's what you get to call him if you know him really well.
Nice. Does he know you get to call him that?
No.
Okay.
I'm sure he'd hate it. I had a chemistry teacher in high school who he called Charles' Law Chuck's Law. He's like, yeah, when you're friends, you call him Chuck. All right. Yeah. All right. Malcom Gladwell. Sorry, popular science. I got, see, rabbit holes.
Yeah.
It's less fun when you're listening to them than when you're reading them because you don't get to go back. You don't know when it's over.
Yeah, so actually that kind of segues into the first thing I want to say about this book is that it is written in a way that is kind of unconventional in a way that I enjoyed. It starts out with the story of Sandra Bland, who I believe that was a popular, that was a, I don't know, it was in the media. It was this case of a woman who was pulled over for failing to signal at a turn, and it ended up with her being arrested and then committing suicide in jail.
Oh, I remember hearing about this.
Yeah.
That was just like 3-4 years ago, right?
Yeah, during, the height of the Black Lives Matter and a lot of attention being paid to police violence, particularly racially. So,
what was her name again?
Sandra Bland.
Okay.
And what this book does, but it doesn't tell you this is what it's going to do, which I enjoyed, is describes, here's what happened in this case, and then it goes on. The next chapter is about a different story, but let me take you back to Bolivia. And then the next chapter is, but then there's this one thing, and it slowly starts to, like, at first I was a bit like, okay, where's this going? I mean, these were, like, a bunch of cool, interesting stories from a psychological perspective, but it tells you these disparate stories about things that, like, you're like, I'm not sure how this is connecting exactly, but each of them illustrates a different point that Gladwell wants to make about why we are bad at talking to strangers. So the book is about basically like cognitive bias, sort of, but it's more about there's this particular bias, so like I'm trying to think if it's mind reading fallacy or typical minding, or maybe it's a few of them together. But people think that they understand strangers. Or they think that people have much more confidence in their ability to understand other people's motives or to be able to read things about people than like actually plays out. And this book brings up a bunch of things that I hadn't heard about before, which was cool, because kind of talking about the thing that I was, complaining about earlier, where a lot of science books for the layperson spends a million words talking about something that like I feel like I learned in middle school. Whereas this was a new take on why socialization is hard.
Can you tell us one of the major themes from the first few chapters?
Yeah, so one of the major themes that kept coming back up was default to truth. And he brought this up when he was talking about, it was the person that investigated Madoff and the Ponzi scheme. So there was this like incredibly paranoid person, and they talked about like his entire life about how this person became this incredibly paranoid person, and his bizarre habits about like just not trusting anybody, always expecting everybody was going to try to screw him over, and that was like he had seen through Madoff like way early, but he couldn't get anyone to listen to him. When actually like a lot of this stuff was really obvious. Like if anybody had actually paid attention to the fact that like nobody knows where this money is coming from. But it was just the fact that nobody was suspicious. Like nobody else is suspicious about this guy. Oh, he's walking around like talking about like the way he makes money just totally openly. He doesn't look like he's lying. Like surely the government or the police or like, so one of the investigative bureaus would know if something was wrong here.
Just the social proof of like, well, people seem to not distrust this guy, so.
Like, but like, this guy couldn't get anyone to pay attention to him.
So what is the default truth thing?
And he talks about a bunch of psychological studies where they've shown that we're really bad at, like, the majority of people are really bad at telling who is lying. So they did this one study where you would have students from a college come in and take a test, and then like if you got a certain number of answers right, then I think it would give you credit or something. Like there was some reward for it, and they paired you up with another random student, and you're supposed to work together. And then at one point the test giver gets a phone call and has to leave the room. The second student is a plant, so the second student turns to the first one and says, I think the answer sheet is over there on the desk. We could just look at it. Like, come on, like, I need these college credit or this money or whatever. I forget what the reward was. And, like, so they try to convince the other person to go look at the test. And then, whether or not they do, there's an interview afterwards where they ask a few, benign questions about how hard do you think the test was? How well do you think you did? How well did you get along with your partner? And then, did you cheat? And then they showed the videos of the interviewers, of the people being interviewed, and when they started asking the more like potent, like uncomfortable questions, like, did any cheating go on while I was gone? Are you sure? If I asked your partner if any cheating happened, what do you think they would say? And so they would show people these interviews and then say, do you think this person's lying or not? And people are really bad at telling whether someone's lying or not. And because we have this idea of what a lying person looks like that is not correct. So lying people get shifty, right? They get really anxious. They, they don't make eye contact. But they brought up the point that, like, there was this one person who absolutely was telling the truth. So what happened was the plant was like, come on, let's look at the answers. And she was like, no, that's not me. No, I, like, got incredibly anxious about it. And then when being interviewed, got so anxious about it, she was like shifting, apparently, like, I don't know, just like twitching. She went on this long rambling, like, no, I didn't cheat. I would never, that's not me. Actually my partner tried to get me to cheat. I didn't want to say this, but they were really trying to get me to do it, and I just kept saying no. And just the most defensive, like, awkward looking. She hadn't cheated. She was just a nervous person. Whereas there were other people who looked so trustworthy, but they were just very good at lying. But like, it's just that it's this funny thing where people think that they can. There's kind of roles, or there's stereotypes about what like different kinds of people look like. Bernie Madoff didn't look like a liar.
It's one of the reasons that they don't allow lie detector tests in court, because all they measure is how stressed you are, which has no correlation to whether you're lying or not for most people.
It has so weak of correlation.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I think famously, I haven't had the chance to test this yet. I would love to. I am told from Penn and Teller's bullshit TV series that they did for those few years.
The clenching your butthole thing?
Clenching your butthole or doing Kegels while answering answering truthfully,
yeah,
and then not doing that while lying.
Yeah.
You give spikes of physical stress whilst clenching.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been in a situation where I've been accused of doing something that I was innocent to, but my protestations weren't believed because I protested too much or something. Never anything serious, but
methinks the lady doth protest too much.
Exactly. At some point in right after high school, someone made like a Facebook page for my brother's dog, and was posting things that like really only the dog might know, and so people thought it was me. I happened to know who it was, but I knew it wasn't me, and so maybe that's what gave me away. Another friend.
Okay.
But it's like, man, will you stop doing this? And I'm like, it's really not me. It's like, I don't fucking believe you. It's like, because I kept smiling or something, because I knew, I don't know if they ever asked, do you know who did it? Because I might have said yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also do this thing that's, speaking of, well, tangentially related, I annoyingly to myself over excuse everything, and I'm really just trying to practice now the art of like just shutting the fuck up all the time, where it's like, don't say stuff. So like, unless it's funny, like there was I was like an hour late for work a couple months ago because the train was delayed, and they ended up stopped the whole south line.
Oh, right.
So they bussed everybody, and the bus driver didn't know we were going, so that took us like 30 minutes to get a mile and a half.
I think I've done the same thing you're talking about. Like your boss is like, "Why are you late?" and you give them a 30-minute explanation, well, making you even later.
Yeah, and with,
you're like, "No, I swear to God, this is real. So let me tell you every detail."
And with this one, I took pictures because it was funny, not because no one cares if I was late. If I just showed up an hour late and be like, "Sorry," they'd be fine with it. But this one was like, there are like 250 people at this platform, and like we're on the train packed in like sardine cans, and it fit like half people trying to wait for a train. So I mean, that was more funny. But I do that, if like, hey Zuber, why'd you do this approach, for this thing at work? I'm like, rather than say I thought it would work best, I would be like, well, really it was this, and I thought that because this and this and that. And it's like, no man, just
it all started when I was born.
And from there it was just all downhill. Mistakes ever since. No, I think there was a valuable anecdote that I read once where somebody missed a job interview because they slept through it. It was like a phone interview. And they emailed back, and they were going to like try and explain, but like, I'm really sorry, this never happens, whatever. Instead, they just wrote back and said, I'm sorry I missed the interview, can we reschedule? And they had said, yeah, of course. I think it was an error on our end anyway. Our scheduling thing's been weird. No problem. And it's like, if I'd opened up with the sorry I slept through the interview, which obviously signals that I don't give a shit about this job or whatever, they probably wouldn't have gotten the second try, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely a lesson in just like saying as little as possible. And maybe because
or like the right amount, maybe.
Yeah.
Which
is often less than I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can definitely say too little as well.
Yeah, you just sit there clammed up when they ask you, why are you late? And just be like, reasons.
You don't need to know.
Yeah, my business.
Yeah. So there's so many other interesting stories like this that...
Unless you're going to Malcom Gladwell us through this, I'm curious, is this going to come back to that woman who got pulled over?
Yeah.
Okay, so don't rush there. I just want to make sure that wasn't left because I was compelled to how this ties together.
Yeah, I also don't want to, like... summarize the book word for word or anything, because then I recommend people read it, and me summarizing it's not really going to do it justice entirely. I do think I want to write a review of it that like does go into more detail that way, but
I think it would be good to at least have people get the major arguments out of it so they don't have to read it.
Well, like the thing is that
like with most of the reviews, like I read on Slate Star Codex, I get the gist of what the book is saying afterwards, and I know I can read it, and I would get a lot more out of it if I did. But I also know like the central thrust. Yeah,
that was more what I wanted to try to write. I just don't think that like trying to talk about it off the cuff, I'm going to do a very good job of that. But I did want to talk about a few of the insights that I got from it that were surprising. Not all of them are entirely related to like the main point of the book, but
Okay.
just like in particular, there was one thing that really surprised me, where there's a chapter about alcohol, and it started out with they're talking about these two anthropologists, husband and wife, who went to somewhere in Bolivia that was this poor farming community, still kind of living the way like with the old traditions. They didn't have a lot of technology. They hadn't like really been very connected to the modern world, and they had this social ritual where they would have these big parties on the weekends. Every weekend, somebody would throw a huge party. They'd slaughter a cow and throw the hide in front of their house so people know that's where the party is, and have a big barbecue. And they had this sort of ritual around toasting where like the head of the community would toast the guests, so say like the anthropologist and his wife, and then they would have to toast their hosts, and the wife has to toast the husband has to toast the wife, then you have to, everybody goes around and you take shots of this traditional liquor that they had. And this liquor tastes terrible. Apparently even the Bolivians hate it. But I guess it was the alcohol they had. And this husband and wife, they came back to the US and they were talking about their experiences, and the wife was like, hey, doesn't it seem funny that I think we were drunk every single weekend? Like, yeah. Like, there was a few strange things that they noticed. So they brought some of this traditional liquor back to a lab and had it analyzed and found out that it was 180 proof.
Holy crap.
So that's laboratory alcohol. So the guy said that his friends didn't believe he'd actually drank this stuff, so in order to prove it, he like sat there with a doctor and took shots of this stuff, and then seemed fine, was holding a conversation like as though everything were normal. Declined a ride home because it was nice and he wanted to walk home, so they followed him, I think, in an ambulance back to his house, and he's just walking down the street, and his wife sees him coming with an ambulance behind him, is like, what's going on? And at that point, apparently he was like, I'm drunk, and then just passed out on the floor, just dead, and then like dead passed out, I mean, and just stayed passed out for like 16 hours, and then didn't remember any of it. And then they talk about alcohol and what we think alcohol does and what it actually does. And this was really cool because I'd never heard this, and it makes perfect sense for me. Alcohol is traditionally thought of, or conventionally thought of, as this agent of disinhibition.
That's what I've always heard.
Yeah, everyone said alcohol lowers your inhibitions, but actually Gladwell argues that it is more useful to think about it as an agent of myopia, because what it actually does neurologically is narrows your like mind's eye, your ability to focus on the present and the past, other things that are going on in the background of your brain, attunes you to the moment and the context that you're in. So this is why some people can drink and alcohol makes them happy.
Yeah.
Because these are the kinds of people that tend to drink at parties, or like, you know, when hanging out with friends in a context for relaxing and partying. And then some other people can drink and it makes them more depressed because they're probably drinking alone at a bar, maybe staring at some stains on the floor, thinking about their marriage going badly and the taxes that are due, and that's all you're focusing on. You can't even think about good things anymore because you're just so sucked into this moment of despair. And this makes a lot of sense for me because I've experienced this thing with alcohol too, where like I'm like, does alcohol make me happy or not?
So what does it mean when like, because when I was going through my, just after my first divorce, I drank, famously, I guess now, for many years, but I did it because, like, I did feel happy when I was drunk, even though I was going through, like, this horrible thing.
Probably because you were, I also drank to deal with anxiety, social anxiety in particular. There was a while where I, like, couldn't go to social events without being drunk because I thought it was because it's, like, disinhibition, but I guess it's just...
You stop thinking about how bad consequences of what you're going to say.
Exactly. Like, I'm not thinking about all the ways this can go wrong. I'm looking at the people around me and being like, hey, this is good. This is a party. There's music. People are having fun. And probably you're doing the same thing where you're drinking in contexts that let you focus on other things. Okay. And, yeah, so...
I'm trying to think. I at some point... I think I had my first alcoholic drink when I was like 17, then didn't touch it again for like 2 or 3 years, or probably until I was 21. because am a complete square. I had a rule, especially at a point where I was stressed. I would drink to alleviate stress there was a few months where I was doing that. Not every day, but do a couple shots a night or something, a few nights a week or whatever. But I had at one point where I was like, man, I'm really bummed. I should go get drunk. And I'm like, no, wait, I should never do that. And I don't think I have. I've done it where like I'm tired and stressed and, that puts you in a bad mood or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I've kind of just already set up a rule for myself where I don't drink to make myself like not sad. Mm-hmm. I tend to not drink that much anyway, but like my experience with alcohol then is almost entirely positive, where you're drinking at a place where you're already having a good time.
Well, that was exactly the point that he was trying to make about this Bolivian tribe, where when you look at their culture more deeply, these were apparently primarily farmers, and like itinerant farmers are migratory. I forget what the term is, but they didn't really have much of a community because so many of the, like, in scare quotes, community. A lot of the people that live in this village, I guess, were gone a lot of the time. They didn't actually get to have these like kinds of social gatherings, as much interaction with each other. So they compensated by doing this ritual on the weekends when everybody would come home, and they intentionally would drink in this context. And it was this like, ridiculously high proof alcohol. But the thing that like the anthropologists were confused about was the fact that they didn't have pathological drinking in this culture. You would think that somewhere where people are drunk every week and having these kinds of parties drinking laboratory alcohol, like there would be violent fist fights and like all kinds of, really bad social consequences, but there weren't, and that was what really confused them. And it's because they only ever drank in this specific context of, we are a community, we are gathering to celebrate togetherness, and we're toasting the people that are important in our lives right now, like showing hospitality. And that's kind of interesting.
It's really common in Europe from what my parents tell me.
Yeah. You can think of other examples too, like cultures where they have these kinds of, like, I maybe it's a cultural evolution sort of thing where
it was probably a survival mechanism. Yeah. I hear most cultures, when they first discover alcohol, do absolutely nothing for about a century until the culture evolves enough.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that, again, this might just be a thing that I've been told a bunch of times by authority figures and haven't questioned, but I think that a lot of times it was people used alcohol in order to avoid, like, contaminated drinking water for the most part. Mm-hmm. I think I'd heard that, like, was it medieval Europe, where people were mostly drinking diluted beer all the time instead of water, even children, like the elderly, because it was the safe drinking water, basically. Yeah. But everybody was a little bit buzzed all the time.
As long as we're looking at urban legends about the history of the world, is it actually true that the propagation of coffee coincided with the Enlightenment?
I'd also heard so. That. I don't know. It's possible.
Right,
yeah, it's another thing that might be worth looking up, but that makes sense to me because coffee is actually nootropic.
Well, that's my thing. Is like, so you sub out beer for coffee, and suddenly you've got a class of people that are just feeling way more productive and intelligent all the time, rather than just kind of sluggish and lazy. Staying up late.
They're a lot more sober, and importantly, to prepare coffee, you have to boil water, which is also a way to make the water drinkable.
I don't know. Well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could cold brew, but like, I don't know how they did it. Yeah, that's fun. Anyway. Coffee's my go-to if I want to be productive, usually. That's like the dumbest thing to say. Sorry, I'm clearly tired. I think we're recording on Sunday the 7th?
Yes, 8th.
8th. So the daylight savings was last night. And
fucking daylight savings.
I think my cat didn't know what time it was either. She came in and woke us up a few times, which is cute and lovely. But then she doesn't even really want pets. She just wants to wake us up. She has food and everything. She just wants to say hi. So
I hate daylight savings so much.
Really?
If I had a time machine, second thing I would do is go back in time and kill Hitler. First thing would be go back and kill Ben Franklin when he proposed this. Or just before he proposed the daylight savings.
Don't kill Ben Franklin.
Motherfucker has
Still
a comment.
Not to do that.
What if you just slap the idea?
He was a sensible guy. You could explain to him, I'm from the future. Here's what happens as a result of this.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, can you clarify the Second Amendment before you write that shit down?
A few other things.
I'm just saying, like, settle that, like, because that's, to me, like, the dumbest constitutional argument. It's like, well, they said this, and it's like, yeah, they didn't know what germs were. They didn't know about, they didn't know, what kind of guns we'd have. Like, let's be real. But, yes, obviously there's a lot of other failures in there, too, that we could have pointed out. But the gun one might have been the easiest sell. saying, hey, can you put a slave thing in there? They're like, well, no, that's actually, people wouldn't sign it if we had a slave thing in there. And,
wasn't the whole point of the gun thing though because they were they were
currently revolutionaries.
Yeah, they were occupied by the British.
Yeah.
Well, so they would want people in the modern day to have the weapons they need to fight off the British as well, right?
I think you might be able to explain what a bad idea that is and how it doesn't work anymore.
All right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to think too, what's the Third Amendment? Can you name it right off?
No. Is that freedom of the press?
You don't have to house soldiers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so like that was also a big problem for them back then. But like that's not like no one today is like, thank God for the Third Amendment, right?
I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Bible, where, especially if you look at the first group of commandments, that like Moses brought down, and then got angry when people were worshiping the golden calf and threw them.
7 out of 8 of them were about how to worship God, right?
Well, like a bunch of them are weird, specific things that only made sense in the context of Bronze Age, like Middle East.
No fucking sculptures.
No fucking sculptures?
When they're worshiping the bronze calf, I think they were also fucking it.
Wait, what?
You're more of a Bible scholar than I am. Am I mistaken?
I have not heard this.
I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of the Bible talks about people doing sex in bad ways and why they're bad.
Let's see. How many of these are about how to worship God? First one, second one, third one, not fourth, fifth, or sixth, or seventh, or eighth, or ninth, or 10th. Okay, so only the first 3 are about how to worship God, right?
Are those the first or second draft of the commandments?
I feel like the first draft was like 30 commandments or something too.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows what the first draft was, right?
No, they had it like, wait, maybe I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure.
Because he came down off the mountain, saw them worshiping the calf, and smashed them. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming they were the same commandments. He just had to go up there and chisel them out.
There was a second group of commandments at one point. I forget if those were the ones he broke but like definitely there's 30 laws that God wrote that are actually written down in the Bible that like nobody ever focuses on.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So how does the motif of our the layers of biases that keep us from understanding strangers properly, how does that tie into that case with that woman being pulled over a few years ago? Or does that spoil the book?
Well, it does a little bit, but I don't know. I have a hard time with spoilers where I don't really tend to care about them that much.
This is also nonfiction, so
yeah.
I said it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I don't think that this will spoil anything. So there were a bunch of things going on in this particular case that Gladwell explains with like side stories or explains the history behind and coins terms for new cognitive biases, and that was what I found really fun, like the default to truth.
Wait, so what is the default to truth?
That was the people being bad. Oh, right, I never even finished that one. So, like, back to the Bernie Madoff guy. That guy's an outlier. As a cooperative species, the theory anyway is that the reason that we tend to believe people. That was it. When they've done a bunch of these psychological studies and keep finding in historical examples that people are more trusting than they actually should be.
Huh.
When which is not like, the general.
Where are these studies done? Because I know a lot of Eastern European countries have very low trusting of other people.
Well, yeah, cultures. I mean, it's probably also cultural and whatever, but like it's more about they talked about like court cases, for example, or like if someone tells you something, you tend to believe them.
God, I wish I hadn't believed my surgeon.
You defaulted to truth there.
I did.
Well, like, yeah, that's kind of interesting, because something I've noticed about rationalist culture is that we're also a really high trust culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
because we all cooperate in prisoners' dilemmas.
Yeah.
Well, but the thing is, in your particular case, I don't think your doctor was defecting in a prisoner's dilemma here. I think that either they had misread it before they walked back into the room to give you the number.
Oh, I'm sure he knew he was lying.
Why would he lie?
Well, I think because this is my assumption too, having now had to interact with people that are a lot of times a doctor or someone will know what is for someone's greater good. Like when you have a kid and they don't want to get a shot or whatever, you tell the kid, oh, don't worry, it'll only hurt a tiny bit, it'll be fine.
Oh, and when they say it's going to be a little pinch.
Yeah. And it turns out, sometimes the kid really gets hurt pretty bad, but it is for their benefit. It is, you lie to the kid in order to get them to do the thing that is better for them, and that if they were as smart and knowledgeable as you, they would want to do as well. And so I think he saw the stuff and was like, yeah, this guy obviously is going to be a lot better off after he has the surgery, but if I actually tell him what the recovery is going to be like, he might not go through with it. So, I'll just lie to push him to go towards the right direction, is the way I see it. My parents are just like, yeah, he's just a, money grubbing scum sucker, just wanted to get you under the knife to collect his paycheck. And I'm like, yeah, well, you come from Eastern Europe, so.
I find their hypothesis
I mean,
more likely than the fact that he was thinking that I should lie to my patients to get them
for
to go
the greater good.
For the greater good, because
see, that's where I go with, because I don't want to.
Because you're not some stupid kid, and in the event of a vaccine hurting more than you thought it would, if it bruises your arm for a couple of days or something, as opposed to being a light pinch for a second.
Well, not even that. Like sometimes kids need surgery or.
Sure, but to run with that easy example, you still get all the benefit, right? If he lies to you about your recovery time and you subsequently injure yourself, then he's just hurting his patients.
That's the problem, yeah.
Right. So that is so obvious that I can't believe that wouldn't have occurred to him if he's been doing this for a long time. And when you're lying to a kid to get a vaccine, you might have to bend the truth or whatever to get them to do the thing that's actually for the greater good. Whereas if you're an adult, you can make a fully informed decision. That's up to you. And if he had said the recovery time was going to be a year, you would have said yes.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree with you. It's just that I now have met a number of people who are like, yeah, people are children. You can't always trust people as rational actors, and that has been my experience as well to some degree. So I am more treating people now like they are irresponsible children than I used to. And so that is why I see where the doctor is coming from.
My top hypothesis on this is there's a word for it. Never attribute to malice that which is explained by stupidity, or which can be.
Yeah.
Well, I also.
So he might have just been hungover that morning when he was telling you, yeah, a couple weeks you'll be fine. That strikes me more likely than him. Yes, I've got this elaborate lie I spin to all my patients. I've been practicing for 25 years.
He probably just tells all patients the same thing. Yeah, 2 weeks you'll be fine.
Right, and no one's gotten mad at him yet?
I don't know. The problem is, what am I going to do? I'm considering a malpractice suit, but it's just his word against mine. There's nothing in writing. And is it even malpractice to lie about recovery time?
Well, that's up to a lawyer. I would say yes.
Yeah.
Especially if
you're doing it regularly. If he actually, if you have proof that he intentionally lied to you,
well,
in order to try to, well, if you could talk to other patients of his.
He's been a surgeon for a long time, and he knows what recovery times are actually like. Especially because, when I went in after 6 weeks and told him, yeah, it's been 3 times longer than it should be, and I'm still not great. And he was like, oh, yeah, it usually takes 12 weeks, sometimes 6 months. I was like, you motherfucker.
Maybe
You goddamn piece of shit.
I mean, I wasn't there for the conversation. Is it possible that, what he meant was that, the actual wound will heal in that amount of time, but the amount of time that the pain will go away will be much longer?
That's
or
possible.
That the full effects are going to
in 2 weeks, but you'll be delicate for 6 months. Could be. At the very least, and that's. That's
why I wish I would have gotten it in writing.
I've never had very serious surgery, but I've had minor surgeries, and they always send me home with a packet.
He literally told me, "Yeah, I got a packet," and the packet said almost nothing in it. It certainly didn't have any time frames or anything.
Oh, mine always
have all that. Listen to what your doctor told you in it. So that's useful.
That's weird.
But I asked him, I like to work out. It keeps me mentally healthy as well as physically healthy. This is important to me. When can I start lifting weights again? He was like, you could probably start, lifting some lighter weights around week 2 or 3, which is when the PA went in to take my stitches out 3 weeks later. He was like, are you fucking kidding me? You're lifting weights? You shouldn't lift anything over 10 pounds under any circumstances.
That is a lightweight.
Yeah. Well, that's a gallon of milk.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
Less than a gallon, more than a gallon of milk. But.
No, but gallon of milk is surprisingly heavy.
Yeah.
And some people are like, I can't lift anything over 5 pounds. It's like, I watched you lift that jug. Yeah, that sucks.
I'm sorry, we are way off track.
We are, but keep us apprised of that, because if you feel like it, it's your personal medical shit. But
it was related to default to truth.
It's true.
That's right. I am as long as we're anecdotally giving examples, I think I mentioned this before, I am stupidly gullible. And I think less so now, but in this, I think is maybe another just truth of how our brains are wired. For me, in the context of understanding a sentence, just to parse it correctly in my brain, for the time it takes me to do that, I believe the sentence. And then I analyze it a second later. But for the time it takes me to hear it and process it, I'm just taking it in as this is true. And someone could say something completely outlandish. I'm trying to think of an example. Sometime in the last couple of weeks, someone say something insane, And I'd be like, wait a minute, you had me there for a second. And they're like, they were clearly making a joke. And I wish I could think,
that happens to me a lot too.
This would be better if I could think of an
I think
example.
That's just bad. I'm just bad at like telling when people are joking.
It was kind of depressing. When I was with Melissa, she was always the kind of person that like, everyone's lying to you. Everyone's trying to screw you. It's like, no, everything's fine. People are good.
Even if that's true, I think I'd rather believe that it's not because you're happier.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think it's true.
Yeah, she wasn't a very happy person overall, but kept proving herself right and me wrong. I was like, God damn it.
Well, I don't know.
We eventually had this saying, got to the saying where like, what went wrong? I expected anything more than nothing from someone. That was my error.
Well, and it seems like if you take that lesson to heart, you end up the kind of person that she is.
Yeah, there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, like
it's true.
Yeah,
that goes
if you're
along
an
with
asshole,
that.
you can tell yourself that it's okay because everyone else is an asshole too.
Yeah, and that's how society spiraled downward.
Right, but I think that they're factually incorrect. Like a lot of people are genuine and cool.
Yeah.
Like what is she going to say? Like, oh yeah, Mr. Rogers, he was totally raping people and and had a basement full of bodies.
Well, I also noticed at the time that my surgeon was wearing a gold crucifix, like underneath his scrubs and all that. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but whatever. He's got a Eastern European name. They're very big Catholics over there, maybe. And now I'm like, not going to trust any fucking doctor who's wearing crucifix under their scrubs because if you're that into Jesus, I don't know if I can trust you.
How big was this thing? Average sized?
I don't know, like
that's
2.5 inches.
That's a super common trinket.
Something I've learned to trust.
Though?
I mean, as opposed to over your scrubs where it's hitting patients in the face when you bend over?
Something I've learned to trust is people's ability to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Like, you can be a very good doctor and then also be religious, and because you just don't, like, those are non-overlapping magisteria.
I know, and I agree.
It's something that I struggle with, too, where, like,
it just
I do work with some, I work in cancer research, and there's people that know about, like, way more than I do about, like, the mechanisms of tiny cells and how you treat very complicated cancer, and then also, like, believe in supernatural shit when they go home.
No. I guess I kind of reminded myself of that quote from Vonnegut where he says, I think it was Vonnegut, if you don't want people to be racist, don't send them as children to areas where people of a different race are trying to kill them. Which it was his commentary on war. But, you have one bad experience and right away you latch on to something that you already had sort of a predisposition against.
But so you're acknowledging that cognitive failure, and then you're saying, right up, I'm not going to work with a surgeon with a crucifix again.
Yes. I'm leaning into it, but hopefully I will find countervailing evidence that will bring my risk assessments back down to where they should be.
I hope so too. I mean, I would.
I will update myself incrementally.
Very well.
There's something to be said, at least, for being self-aware about when you know you're being irrational.
Yeah.
Back to Sandra Bland. There's a section talking about suicide in this book where, what did they call it? I'm trying to remember the phrases that he coined, or the idea about suicide being coupled. That was it.
Like
so I don't think he actually coined that. I think this is a psychological term, but coupling is where certain behaviors are coupled to certain environments, certain contexts. They talk about a bunch of other cases in which behaviors are coupled, and suicide is coupled, and it is really difficult for people to wrap their heads around it, though, because especially, unfortunately, like social workers and like mental health people that are in the mental health profession as caretakers get to know these people, and they don't want to think of this person as, well, nobody wants to think about a person as an automaton, I guess.
Yeah.
But
so what is suicide coupled to?
Well, the history that Gladwell first brought up was town gas, where there was the type of gas that they used to use in, it was Britain in particular, England, it had a high propensity for creating carbon monoxide. And what the like unfortunate, side effect of this was that everybody had a gas-powered oven, and they also had these cars that were made with that also produced a lot of carbon monoxide. So there's a point where every middle-class family has a very convenient, cheap, easy way to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And the thing that they don't think, sorry, you were going to say something?
No, it's a tangent. Go ahead.
Okay. So the thing that, like, people don't think about is, well, there's a lot. It's it's complicated. People are complicated. Women in particular, they pointed out, often don't want to leave a mess because they don't want to inconvenience others.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't shoot yourself or do anything that's going to, you don't burn the house down.
They also don't want to, like,
you don't want to
ruin their
disfigure your body
bodies.
either. You want to. A lot of people are like, well, I want, if I'm gonna die, I want it to be painless as possible, like as non-scary as possible. Especially if you're already traumatized. I mean, like, it takes a lot of. So they were talking about like this poet who apparently struggled with suicidal ideation her whole life, and then finally killed herself with carbon monoxide. But talking about like praising, I think it was Hemingway, for having the courage to shoot himself. Being like, I don't have that kind of bravery.
There's something
admiringly. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, so they're talking about bridges too, where I forget which bridge, but they built a bridge and there were people committing suicide jumping off of it, and they tried to propose that they build a safety net, and people were really opposed to it, even though like they had spent way more money doing like other kinds of safety precautions for people accidentally hurting themselves around this bridge. But when it came to, here's like, we're going to put a suicide net, what do you think? People voted against it, and they were replying, people who want to kill themselves are going to find a way to do it because they're just so distressed. Like, it doesn't matter that, they don't like the idea that behavior's coupled. Or I guess the idea that what it turns out is that suicide is often this kind of
it's a crime of opportunity.
Yeah, crime of opportunity, and then also like if you get the time to actually really think about it, or like you can be talked down. Like people, it's not really a rational act a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Even if you do have suicidal ideation your whole life, like that poet, like you don't really want to die. You want to not feel terrible.
I hear when they replaced the gas in England, the suicide rates went down and just stayed down permanently.
Yep.
It's not like people found some other way to kill themselves. They just stopped doing it.
Yeah, there are other ways that are harder and scarier, and yeah, the more you limit access to ways to kill yourself, the less people kill themselves. And so yeah, Sandra Bland committing suicide was a lot of people not recognizing a bunch of the warning signs. And they talk about the Kansas City policing as well, which
So what were the warning signs that they missed?
She had a blog or a video, a vlog, I guess, a vlog. Mm-hmm. Her personal history was she'd had a really rough time, and she had been struggling with suicide. I think actually attempted it. And it was in the particular context of the kind of thing that ended up happening to her, like triggering feelings of loss of control.
Is it? So, I mean, I'm not trying to defend the cops because what they did was awful, but is it also the responsibility of every police department to go through everyone's blogs and vlogs when they're brought into jail to make sure that they aren't have that suicidal risk?
If I'm arrested, I demand the persecuting officers listen to every episode of this podcast.
I agree. This is why we always make them 2 hours.
Including the Patreon exclusive ones.
Yes.
Sorry, that wasn't
the
super
ones
funny.
That are like just us getting attacked by dogs. And where's that dog?
Upstairs being a good girl.
Oh,
no.
Doggy. Okay.
So what does that have to do with talking to strangers, though? The suicide coupling?
I think it's that they failed to anticipate what is actually going on in this person's head.
Yeah. Oh. Well, they both failed to understand each other's contexts. They talk about the Kansas City policing where it makes perfect sense why, or not perfect sense, it was actually pretty fucked up, but why the cop behaved the way he did, because the way they were training cops was this very specific algorithm of looking for any small example, like any small deviance in order to pull somebody over to look for hard drugs, weapons trafficking. It's like, this was the way that cops were catching up many more of the larger criminals. But unfortunately, what it ends up doing, like the side effects when you take it outside of the context of Kansas City, is cops will react to their biases. So they're told things like, look for suspicious people. So a white cop finds a black person. Failing to signal a turn. He noticed that her license plate was out of state. There's a bunch of things that apparently a cop will notice that's just a little bit weird, and it'll be an excuse to pull somebody over and to scan for drugs or weapons. Mm. And Sandra Bland just happened to have a bunch of things that looked weird from the outside, but then if you actually knew her life story, it was like she had just moved. Mm-hmm. She was about to start a new job, and the other thing was that they said that she reacted in a way that was, or she was mismatched, I think was the word. They were talking about a couple of chapters about people who are mismatched. That was one of the major points of the book, where the way people behave doesn't trigger the right, like, oh, that's a this kind of person, or like that's the way that this kind of person acts. Sandra looked belligerent and angry, but she was incredibly depressed. But it's just that, like, culturally we have an idea of what a depressed person looks like, and it looks like someone who looks very sad and is very submissive, not somebody who's freaking out.
So is the main thesis of the book that we're just really bad at talking to people we don't already know?
Yeah, I mean, we're bad at knowing people. It's so.
Ooh, that's depressing.
Going back a bit, like when I heard the title of the book, what I thought Talking to Strangers was going to be about was more of a how-to guide.
Mm-hmm. Does he not have any how-to advice?
No, it's that's not what it's about. It's about the ways that we consistently fail to read others, and that's cool because I've read a bunch of how to talk to strangers books. It's a topic that I'm interested in because social things never like came naturally to me, so I've had to learn this, and I'm always trying to find more advice. But there's also a bunch of books like that out there. There's not really a lot of books like this, where this is a book saying, hey, your intuition is really bad, actually. It's talking about the mind reading fallacy and the typical minding fallacy, and then some others that are much more specific that I think were useful to have learned, because it's one of those books that, like, almost every chapter gives you a new kind of mental framework that you can look around and now you're just seeing it everywhere. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And there's more than I've brought up too. Some of them were specifically things that you can, point back in retrospect to the Sandra Bland case and realize what the cop did wrong, and the way people talked about it after the fact was wrong. And
so, is this a book that I want to avoid because it's really depressing?
I think not.
Because it sounds like it's all about just how it's very hard to connect with anyone, which is kind of a...
No, that's not the thesis or the premise. It's not about connecting being hard. It's more about people making snap judgments, and especially us having these cultural ideas of what, like, a liar looks like, for example, that are wrong.
Okay.
But
well, we're starting to run low on time, but did you want to come back again in next episode and, like, summarize some of the ones for us so we can know better what our biases are and what to look out for when we're talking to strangers?
Sure, I can do a quicker sort of just, here's this term and it means this, if we want to do that. I just kind of...
I mean, if you think that would be interesting.
Well, I definitely think it's interesting, but...
Because it sounds like there's many chapters in this book, and I'm like, it sounds almost like every chapter has, like, another cool thing that, like,
I guess
if we knew about it would reveal something about society and how we're doing things incorrectly.
Yeah, I guess I more wanted to kind of just make a teaser trailer for this book, because I do think that it's a worthwhile book for reading, especially that might be interesting to rationalists who care about cognitive biases and psychology. But sure, I could definitely do a much quicker summary of, like, just a bare bones kind of point by point.
Cool.
I think that sounds really interesting too.
Yeah,
so.
if you guys would be interested in it. Sure, other people would.
Let's plan for that then, because that would be awesome.
Cool.
Well, I'll start out with a, I don't know, I think maybe an easy one, an interesting one. This one came up on the anthropic principle episode, but it's not about the anthropic principle itself, so even our listeners get into rabbit holes. On the Discord, Coy said... Coy quoted Jess saying, even if I believe that a Christian God exists, I still wouldn't go to church. And Coy replied with, have you heard about hell? And Wyweaker jumped on that saying, yeah, that claim sounded extremely irrational to me. I understand that God is evil, but we are talking about eternal suffering and bliss here. I would 100% make it my life's goal to convert as many people as possible. Did you have any sort of comment about that?
Well, first of all, you're assuming context of, like, the thing is, I didn't say anything about hell. Yeah. All I was saying was if, like, a supernatural being who had the traits of the Christian God existed, I wouldn't want to worship him. And, like, by talking about how I would feel about it and what I would want to do about it, I'm not necessarily saying that, like, I guess this is something like, yes, under, like, threat of literal torture, probably I would, like, fuck up on the trolley problem or shoot my best friend, if, you know. But like, it's more, I was trying to make a point about the fact that I think that it's a terrible idea. Like, I wouldn't be the kind of person that's like, man, I wish, you know, it sucks that God doesn't exist. I don't believe him, but I wish he did. Like, no, I don't. And
I see. My response to Coy would be like, yes, I have heard about hell, and that's exactly why I think that God should be overthrown.
I mean, yeah, like the thing I'd really want to do would be go kill him.
Yeah.
Get together, you know, there's more of us than him in hell.
I mean,
but like, I don't know. Again,
I kind of
this
think
is
it's a
something
moral duty to fight God at that point.
This is something that makes really fun fiction.
Yeah.
But also, like, still none of this has been defined. Again, like when you're talking about eternal suffering versus eternal bliss, what do those words mean? Are you talking about eternal wireheading? I guess, like I don't think that eternal suffering could even be a thing that exists, because just the way that we work, people get used to anything.
Yeah, but if God's all powerful,
I think
Bart Simpson
if God's all powerful, I mean, like, sorry, what?
Bart Simpson made that joke, like when you just get used to the pain, like easing into a hot bath.
Yeah.
I've got two quick thoughts on the like, have you heard about hell response? Like one of them, that's always my sort of go-to. Well, not go-to. That's one of my things when I consider the I just had the word for it. What's that thing where you should believe because it might be true?
Pascal's
Thank
wager.
you. Yeah, Pascal's wager. Like going to church and saying all the right words isn't enough. Like, and it's also not just enough to like choose like, oh yeah, well I'll just choose to vaguely believe and, you know, try and be a good Christian. It's like no. Like you got to pick the most evil, hardcore, like devil god, because that's the most vindictive one who won't reward your nice thoughts and trying. You've really got to go like gung ho with it. It's like it's not going to be enough to go to church and, you know, tithe 20%. You got to go like full jihad. Yeah. And there was I'll plug a movie that's from 2010 that I just saw last week called The Invention of Lying. It was, the premise is somehow society is almost exactly like it is now, but people can't lie. Like it just, that they just don't say things that aren't true. It never occurs to them. And it's
until Ricky Gervais figures out how, right?
He just, it occurs to him to ask for more money out of his account than he had before.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, there must be a glitch with our system. It says you only have $300, but yeah, here's the 800 you wanted. And so he can tell anyone anything, and they just believe him. So he's at the bar with his friends trying to convince them, like, because he doesn't have a word for lying or what he's doing. So he's like, okay, well, I'm black. Oh, well, I guess I can kind of see it. Well, I'm an Eskimo. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I invented the bicycle. No way. Like, so he's doing that. And then there was this really sweet moment in the movie that actually made both me and Rachel emote, which was his mom's dying. And she's like, I just don't want to, you know, lie in oblivion forever. And it's recounting is actually emotional. He's holding her hand and he's telling her, you won't. All your friends will be there. You'll be young again. You can dance. You know, you'll have a nice house. It's gonna be fine. And because lying doesn't exist, she believes him, and she dies very warmly and peacefully. But the doctors and nurses over here, and he's like, "How do you know these things?" So then he's like a prophet, and then he goes off and he's trying. Like then there's like, you know, a group of people around his house, like of hundreds, trying to, you know, learn about this, what he knows about the afterlife, and he doesn't handle it in the most rationalist savvy way, but he does it kind of funny. He for some reason invents from whole cloth that there's an invisible man in the sky who causes things to happen, and if you're nice and you don't try and screw up and you know, don't kill anyone on purpose, then you get to die and have a nice mansion and all the flavors of ice cream and all this and that. But the when he's pitching the idea and explaining about the man in the sky, which just, you know, my rationalist tearing this apart is like, you don't actually need that. They'll believe whatever you say. You can leave the man in the sky out of it.
Right.
But when this is relevant to the Coy's reply here, they're explaining, yes, he's responsible for everything that happens. Wait, so when my mom got cancer, that was his fault? And when when I hit that dog or whatever, that was his fault? And it's like, yes. And it's like, we got to kill this bastard before we've got to stop this bastard before he kills us all.
Yeah.
If someone from the crowd shouts that, and I think that's a completely reasonable response.
Yeah.
Yeah, like from the ground up, it's an insane idea, right? And yes, so the response is yes, let's overthrow this terrible thing. But if you can't, then yeah, I guess knuckle under. But
again,
that in reality would be the worst thing ever. And it was never clear to me why Satan punished people.
Right.
Because Satan hates God too,
yeah.
Right? I'm sure there's some vague interpretation of that in theology, but like, is it just because he's super, super evil? Like,
I don't even know where the fuck that came from, actually. Like, that's not in the Bible.
Right.
Satan wasn't even Satan in the Bible. When he's first introduced, he's just the other that comes and talks to God and is like, oh yeah, well I think that Who the fuck was it?
Job.
Job, yeah.
Yeah,
Like, I think Job would curse your name if you killed his family and all of his animals and covered him in boils.
And God thought, like, bet on. Let's
He's like,
fuck
"Oh,
this
yeah?"
dude up and see what happens. Yeah.
I feel like I've probably complained about this before, but the thing that I find the most, like, the most, maybe not the most disturbing part of it, but, like, the one that just really tweaks me the most is he kills his whole family, his wife, his kids, and then he gives him a new wife and kids.
Yeah, the better wife and kids.
To me,
Be glad, Job.
The most annoying part of that is that if you know everything, you know what's going to happen. And you don't need to do the horrible thing where you torture the person and say that it'll work out afterwards. Like,
this was pre-New Testament where he didn't know everything yet.
That really makes me wonder about, like, whether the people writing the Bible think that, like, is that what they thought people care about? Like, or did people? I don't know. It's just like, here's a wife
People
and kids.
very
Like, they're
different back then.
Here's a generic wife and kids. We'll order you a new one from Amazon Prime. It'll be here in 2 days, and your life will be just the same as it was.
You don't. That seems very inhuman. And I think that people weren't that different back in the day. Like, people formed attachments with their children and spouse, right? Or, like.
Also, I believe there is some controversy as to whether the original ending of Job existed. That it just clashes so much with the rest of the book. It seems like the message
like, he gave everything back.
Yeah,
after
yeah.
he,
It seems like the message of Job is just, you know what, God can do what he wants, and that's all there is to it. You don't get to question or wonder. And then at the later point, someone put in, but because he was so faithful to God, he got everything back.
He was rewarded. Yeah. Now, that definitely
ending.
sounds like a retcon. A lot of the Bible is very much in line with because God is an anthropomorphized force of nature. I mean, if you are a Bronze Age Israelite wondering why, like, I'm the only survivor from this flood that wiped out my whole village, and, like, why did that happen? I guess God just does whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah. So thing is, I'm a little torn on this because I like to talk a big game, right? I absolutely like my fiction to be, we have to murder this god, and I want to say I would be on that side too. But on the other hand, like, if I was actually living in Nazi Germany, I don't know if I would, like, run out in the streets, guns blazing, first time I saw a Nazi patrol to take them down. You
would ingratiate yourself with Hitler personally so you could take him down yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
That was actually the analogy I was going to bring up too, where I'm like, because this is God and hell and whatever, like, it's easy to abstract about it, but it's like, what if it was the same thing about, like, oh, you're going to go kill Hitler? Have you heard of gas chambers?
Yeah.
I'm like, it almost sounds like a non sequitur to me. I'm like, but what if a bad thing happens?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's the point. I'm trying to stop the bad thing. Like,
I think it would be, it would probably be, at the very least, you should say, you know, I'm going to pretend to be a believer and secretly work against God in the best way I can to hope to someday take him down in the future. But I certainly don't think anyone should be out there like, you know, I'm 100% making my life's goal to convert as many people as possible, you know? It would be my life's goal to convert people to the cause of secretly taking God down.
But God would be wise to that if he knows everything.
Yeah.
God's OP. It's just not fair.
I mean, at this point, we're talking about fantasy worlds anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm more like, I was trying to assert that my values
totally
are more like this is terrible and shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that I wouldn't cave to torture because I'm amazing. I don't know. I've never been tortured. I probably would crack like anybody else. That's another thing. There's going back to this story real quick. There's a chapter about torture and talking to strangers and about how you can break anybody.
Torture strangers.
If you really want to know a person, torture him.
Yeah, but the thing is,
I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, it was very much the whole torture doesn't work because you can torture any human enough that they'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
Yeah.
But they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear.
Right.
They're not
Whether
going to
it's
tell
true
you
or
the
not.
truth. They won't even know what the truth is anymore after you, like, break them far enough.
And because I know that, my pre-commitment to torture is like I will cave at the threat of torture.
Yeah.
I loved that in Deadpool 2 when T.J. Miller's like Cable's sitting there threatening him like I'm gonna bend your fingers the way they shouldn't bend, and then I'm gonna get some nails or whatever, and he's just like, okay, I'll tell you everything.
Like, let's just skip that whole part. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna eventually tell you everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you everything. Why don't I just have all my fingers after I'm done telling you everything? Perfect. What was I gonna say? Something torture.
Maybe you could make it harder for them. Buy your allies an extra day or two, if that is a thing that might be valuable.
I suppose. Like, in Deadpool 2, he didn't do that, but
it's also a comedy.
It's also a comedy.
Well, one of the things that was yeah, we probably should wrap up. One more thing that was kind of cool though, or kind of interesting. Apparently, when they were capturing various people in various wars. Oh my god, I can't remember words or things, but the female soldiers would not cave anywhere easily, like near as easily as the male soldiers, where it was this probably they said the psychology is if you are a female soldier, you've had to deal with a lot of shit already and you've like kind of internalized this hard ass perspective. But what they kept doing was when they're trying to get a male soldier to spill the beans about something, they would pull a female soldier out and threaten to torture her, and then they would always cave, and the women would be screaming at them like, I wouldn't have told, I did my job, why wouldn't you do your job? And they wouldn't tell either. Like it was really hard to break the female soldiers. They would just be like, I'm gonna torture your male comrade, and they'd be like, well, he signed up for it. That's
why I generally always prefer my like fantasy and heroes and my action heroes and stuff like that to be women, because like for a dude to be in the fantasy army taking up swords or whatever is just like every guy's expected to do that, right? You're not special at all. But for a woman to be in that position, like there's something unique and interesting about her that she ended up in that spot.
Or anybody who I guess is marginalized or not going to be the typical soldier. Like
exactly.
It's just an interesting but then I also dislike the fact that it kind of keeps pointing out the fact that this is unusual. It's not as unusual anymore. It still is. Like, it's still the norm for, I guess most militaries are largely comprised of men, but it's
becoming more common.
It's less of like...
Especially since so many military jobs nowadays don't involve direct combat.
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of people that are piloting drones are women.
Oh.
They found that they're psychologically better at it.
That's distressing. Are women more psychopathic?
I forget what the reason was. I feel like looking this up again, because now I'm not sure if I remember correctly. I think it was more about conscientiousness.
Okay.
Or possibly it was you know what? I don't even want to say things, but like I don't know if I'm saying true things or not, or just misremembering.
So to put a lid on the whole hell thing, I took it at face value. I think what you just said correctly, or I interpreted what you said correctly, is like you're making a value statement, not like what you would do in real life. Like I thought that was clear. I feel like
it's too absurd
to be gentle. That was nitpicking. Yeah.
It just seems like the argument of have you heard of you will be threatened and hurt if you don't do the thing someone says. I don't think that's a good argument. That's a reason to fight against that person. It's not a reason to be like, oh, okay, says the guy who still pays his taxes.
Hey,
well, because you don't have a rebellion big enough to do the things that you say you would like to do. Right?
I need to secretly start a counter-government conspiracy.
This is a conspiracy. The name's right in the show.
That's true. Yeah. Damn it. I gave it away. So Globy over at the subreddit, which actually still exists.
Or Globby.
Globby?
I don't know.
Okay. The Discord is where most of the interaction happens, but there is still a subreddit, and some people do still use it. So you can check that out at r/the Bayesian conspiracy. Anyways, Globby pointed out that squirrels breaking things is actually quite common. This was in response to my saying like how crazy it was that the LHC was delayed like 3 or 4 times, and one of those times was like a random squirrel getting in someplace. They chew on wires, store acorns in antennas. Engineers seeing specific squirrels in specific tube might say that it's surprising, but the LHC is so huge, it's actually not that weird that something went wrong.
Yeah, isn't it like 16 miles circumference? So
that's okay.
That's a lot of areas for squirrels to poke into.
I am significantly reducing my confidence that was that unusual of a thing. But there were like 3 or 4 pretty coincidences.
I like squirrels. That's my reply.
Cool. I like squirrels too, and also I can confirm that they're really good at they're just mischievous. Actually, I'm a big fan of mischievous animals. Like I kind of like the asshole animals. That my friend has this cat that expresses affection by coming over and just biting you, or like
a gentle biting.
Well, yeah, it doesn't break the skin, but it's also like a lot of people like think this cat is like a sociopath, and actually more like. There's a bunch of stuff I already knew about cat psychology, but more recently I was looking up this specific thing where cats have this kind of bro culture, like amongst themselves, where they do actually like kind of express affection or intimacy by like fucking with each other, like gently biting each other, like smacking each other around. Because that's also how kittens play. Like doing like kind of like a fake wrestling thing, like grab your friend, give him a noogie, like punch him in the eye. Yeah, but like what a cat does that to a human, people are like always like, what did I do wrong?
I knew it. So when I'm petting my cat, she will occasionally, like, she'll flop, like, really heavily and, like, just, like, roll over and, like, expose her tummy, and then you're scratching her tummy and she enjoys it. And then she'll grab my hand with her front paws and then just, like, kick with her back ones. And she's doing it without her claws.
Yeah.
She's just doing little kicks. And it's really cute. And then she'll do little nibbles, too. But she's clearly having a good time.
Yeah.
And, like, I think she can get overstimulated, and then when she's bored, she'll leave, or when she's done with it, she'll leave. But yeah, if she's kicking to get rid of me, she wouldn't grab my hand first. She's just like, kick, 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 kick. She's playing.
My cat does that too.
Yeah. I love it. I'm trying to get it on video, but she's very conscientious about cameras.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, she just knows, like, all right, Rachel, she's doing it. Pull the camera out. Then Rachel will move, and she'll, like, oh, I'm being filmed. Okay, no, I'm a good kitty. I'm a good kitty on camera.
I've noticed that with a lot of animals. They don't like being filmed, and, like, I don't think they know what being filmed means. I think they just don't like having a strange object pointed at them.
Oh, okay. And also the owners start to get weird. You're not paying attention to the cat anymore. You're paying attention to the object.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is over on the Discord, Mordinamail, the doof.
You called it Discorf.
I noticed that
Did
too.
I?
I wasn't going to point it out, but now it's pretty great.
From now on, the Bayesian Conspiracy Discord is called the Discorf.
Perfect. I read this too, Matt's comment.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To me, the great filter, the biggest one, and just before we dive into his awesome one, mine's super boring. I'm going to say eukaryotic life is the biggest filter as far as I'm concerned. There's probably planets out there covered in slime, but they're all, single-celled and boring. Or just one big chain of amino acids, right?
Ooh.
Just one big goop pile.
Yeah.
The cube from D&D?
Oh, the gelatinous cube?
The gelatinous cube, thank you, yeah. Anyway.
So, Matt brings up, Matt, Mordinamail.
It's a public name.
Okay, cool.
Matt Dinamo.
Yeah, there we go.
I wouldn't have outed his username. Yeah.
Wants to bring out his favorite candidate for the Great Filter, because we talked about the Great Filter briefly in that episode as well. Oil. It'd be incredibly difficult to bootstrap a technological civilization without oil. Maybe impossible. The only way oil happens is if a very specific set of geological circumstances are met. You need a certain rate of deposition. Deposition? Did I pronounce that
I think
right?
it's deposition.
Deposition, okay. Of organic matter, coupled with a certain rate of erosional deposition from land masses. And for that to happen, you pretty much need a certain level of weather, enough that there's steady erosion, but not so much that you have repeated massive erosional events that destroy your basins. You need a certain level of geological activity and a pretty specific temperature gradient on your planet, such that the typical burial process results in heating up and cooking the organic matter into oil. You need the right amount of oxygen so that your oil isn't oxidized in place and made useless. If all of these parameters are off, your planet has no oil. Or coal, for the same reasons. Which, holy shit.
Yeah, it makes a very compelling case, and I like it a lot, because, people I remember countered with, like, well, we could use this. It's like, yeah, we could, but that's a lot harder. Yeah. And that came a lot later, after we'd already bootstrapped our civilization.
Right. Someone brought up whale oil, but there's not that many whales.
There's not a lot of whales.
Not enough to,
I think not on our planet.
It'd be really hard to farm them enough to harvest their oil to power a civilization.
Yeah, I just don't think you could get enough from any sort of animal to run our civilization.
The fact that we happen to be on a planet that's full of basins, full of just like really easy energy, certainly helps.
So there might be like hundreds of thousands of pre-industrial civilizations out there just kind of stuck with no
banging
oil.
rocks together, trying to make fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Poor bastards. How far could we have gotten? Well, I mean, before we had oil, we had water wheels. Like with they could probably get up to a late medieval level of technology.
Again, you're assuming like if they had everything that we have, the exact conditions, but with no oil. It's again like another. Here's a weird like coincidence thing, and like you kind of trace it back and be like, how unusual is this? But
oh man, are you taking away all our fun again?
I'm sorry, I have to do the no fun thing.
No.
It's like
I think that it can be. I think that can be. I think that's still fun. Like for every planet that has all the conditions that lead up to like say medieval technology, oil is probably basins of oil enough to power the planet for a few centuries is probably a smaller percentage of those planets, just because of the things that have to be lined up for it, right?
Right.
So yeah, you could get to the comfortable level, or even maybe everyone has I don't know how easy it would be to make and distribute batteries or something that could store charge energy from water wheels or something. But like even if you got that far, still a lot harder to get to space without just kickstarting technology that way, right?
Yeah, maybe they do it eventually, but we'll get there first because we got oil.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some other, like, really readily available source of energy that's really common throughout the rest of the universe, and people think this about us. Look at those poor assholes just burning dinosaur fossils.
Yeah. They have to dig up dead animals to burn. Like, we just use
Mostly
whatever.
plant matter.
Huh?
Mostly plant matter.
Sure.
People always say dinosaurs, but I'm like, it was mostly plant matter.
It's more fun to think of dinosaurs.
All right, fine.
But yeah. No, point
I had
taken.
no idea that the Sinclair dinosaur was there because oil is quote unquote made from dinosaurs.
I literally didn't. I'm just, my
That makes
mind's being
perfect
blown right
sense.
now, too.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that is so morbid.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I never made the connection either.
We're burning his family.
Delicious dinosaur juice.
Yeah. Okay. And the last feedback that we're going to hit today is from quite a bit before this. MQP says, I'm kind of baffled that none of the people there seem to take the personal, positive part of marriage. This was, I think, when we were talking about marriage on, I don't know if that was a direct topic or if it came up in an episode or something.
I don't remember.
We did an anti-marriage episode. Well,
Yeah.
you tried to make an anti-marriage episode. And
Yeah, I don't think
I
this
played
was that
middleman
one.
and Naveen. Okay, yeah.
I think
Maybe.
it came up again since then.
Yeah. Anyways, MPQ says, the part where you establish common knowledge about the importance of your relationship by sending a costly signal about it and doing a ritual. Which, now that he mentions it, is a really good point. Creating common knowledge is both important and difficult, and you can't often just say things. You have to signal them, and signals got to be costly. MPQ says, Eni seem to think that it was just society telling you what to think, and thereby worthless. Damn your donut! Donut in my lung! It's not coronavirus!
All right, we'll let him choke, and I'll respond to the first part of that, which is, if I was smart, like, who commented this?
MQP.
If I was smart like MQP, I might have put that in my pitch for marriage as to why I'm for it. Like, if it works for you, like, don't, it's one of those things. But I'm married, I love it. People keep, like, the common question, we've been married for less than a year, is like, how's things different? You guys looking, and then leading up to it, you guys looking forward to, like, post-marriage and all that? I'm like, no, it's like gonna be exactly the same as it is now. Like, we've had the life that we have now for the last 8 years. Mm-hmm. What it was like, it was a fun celebration, and ritual is not a bad word for it. We picked and chose the parts of the ritual, like the common tropes of it that we liked, and disregarded the parts that we didn't like. But yeah, I'm on board so far.
Yeah. Within Reason responded that a prenup establishes common knowledge between the two people being married, which usually a wedding doesn't. And MPQ replied, point taken, but the common knowledge that I care about is stuff like this couple makes most decisions together and shares values. So if you're doing something that impacts one of them, you should take the other into account. Not things like what would happen to the house if they divorce. Inyar says you don't need any legal stuff to accomplish that, and I disagree. I think having real material consequences associated with being married is a reason why the tradition became powerful and remains powerful. And if you tried to replace it with something that had no consequences, people would not take it seriously. And I think that's a good point. Whenever I know that someone is coupled, I assume that anything I say to one of them will be common knowledge between the two of them by the end of the day.
What if you have like a 9-person polycule?
That is
Not coupled.
depends. I mean, that depends on how close those individual relationships are.
What if you have a business partner who you are much more financially invested with than your spouse, and you're both financially independent from each other?
I would not expect that of a business partner. If I told something to Steven and he was in business with someone else that I told him in confidence, I would be, hurt and think it's a really shitty thing for him to do to tell it to his business partner. But I would expect that Rachel would know before the end of the day.
For the record, I've said this before. Like, most things we talk about, I feel like you'll say to the podcast. So, like, I'm fine talking about it with close people.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, can you keep this between us? I always do. That's not between us and Rachel.
Okay. I literally do not want, if I'm coupled with someone, I do not want anyone to tell me something that they don't want the coupled person to know. Because
and you've never
then
told me
I
anything
either
like
have
that.
to keep a secret from the coupled person or I have to betray their trust.
Yeah,
I just don't like secrets.
Don't put me in a weird spot where, like, I don't know, I can't imagine the kind of knowledge you could have or want to share that would be, that you wouldn't also share with Rachel. But
Turns out only males have souls.
for the record, like, I had something, and now I don't know what's on the record. So anyway, that's my general thing. Is like we don't really go home and talk about, like, tell me everything that, is going on with all your friends. Like, in fact, that's even like a common joke among, men, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh man, Jeff's getting divorced. It's like, oh my God, why? It's like, I don't know. He said he's getting divorced and he didn't want to talk about it, so we didn't. It's like, but how do you not know? It's like, well, we didn't talk about it. Like, there are people that I've known forever and I don't know what the least bit what's going on in their lives. It just doesn't come up, right?
Yeah.
So we don't follow the TV trope of going home and like gossiping about everyone we know. So
man, my former boss and his wife gossiped about everybody, and like it was their favorite hobby, the two of them. It was kind of bizarre to me because I just don't understand that kind of gossip culture. Like there's a difference between I prefer radical honesty, but I don't like the like layers of secrets that gossiping causes.
Yeah.
Where like
I don't have any patience
one of them
for
would
that
be
shit
like,
whatsoever.
"Oh man, do you want to hear about this thing that's happening with your coworker and his friend?" And I'm just like, "No." The way you're saying it is weirding me out right now.
Makes me think that I'd be safer saying no. Your 9-person polycule comment is really interesting. I mean, it has me thinking now.
Well, like, the thing that I'm responding to there is the couple privilege thing, or the like.
Yeah. No, but I think this is like MQP's point. Like, it's easier, I think, to establish common knowledge of a couple pairing because you're often seen together, you often talk about each other. But when there's 9 people, it's much harder. And I can see like how having a big, costly ritual that you invite everyone in the community to, I'd be like, oh, okay, so these 9 people are together, or like maybe these 4, and then they're linked between these 2, and then these 3. Like having a big establishment like that would probably help. So
I like rituals.
I almost think like, maybe having big marriage rituals for more complicated situations would be a better use of those resources.
I don't hate marriage on like the principle. It's more that there's a bunch of things about it. First of all, like it's powerful and that's why it remains powerful. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's a lot of shitty things about it that did make it powerful and a good strategy, I guess. If you're like claiming a human as property thing, or buying a human with a dowry, and then like the whole like I don't know, there's stuff that made sense in the context back then that doesn't anymore, and still maybe wasn't super great for all parties involved. Women cough back then. But like, what if I wanted to? Why is it that like it has to be a couple? And why does it have to be, like, in the context of a romantic or sexual relationship with somebody that you... Like, I couldn't make this kind of costly signal with my best friend. There's no marriage for your best friend ritual.
I think there should be.
What if I had a best friend who I had, like, I was much closer to than anybody else in my life?
Yeah.
Like, so there's some things about marriage that still bug me, and I like being able to point those out. And it's not saying that, like... Because I complain about marriage doesn't mean that I hate it and I want to get rid of it. And I don't think anybody else should do it,
And I do think...
The reason that I'm not bringing up the, like, obvious benefits of marriage is because that's not relevant to...
Yeah. That the downsides outweigh the benefits.
If you're Inyash.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean. I mean, I've been talking about maybe marrying Phoenix, but it would not be the traditional... There's not going to be a diamond involved. I don't want my family nearby, or a bunch of the assumptions to be made about, like, what this means. Or even the gender roles thing around marriage, too, is just, like... there's this, like, when are you going to have a baby or whatever? And it's Phoenix doesn't want kids. I kind of want kids, but I don't want to have a kid because of dysphoria. But my other partner wants to have a kid with their body because they like that idea. And that would be cool if, we all just co-parented this kid. And I just want to be able to make these kinds of rituals work for me and my circumstances and my people. I think marriage is very limiting.
And I my sales pitch on it for what it worked for me is like, we don't have the tropey style relationship anyway, so we don't fall into the norms of like, well, this everything you saw on TV in the 90s and 2000s or whenever you grew up, I guess, right? Like, we don't do that stuff, and I wouldn't suggest anyone marry a partner that they're doing that stuff with unless they really want to have that sort of relationship.
I'd never merge finances with somebody. That's bizarre to me.
We don't have our finances merged. Like, why would we?
Legally, you do.
Well, I
in
suppose
practice they aren't, but
yeah, if things got hairy and she turned into a psychopath, we might. But like, my like right now, the mortgage is in my name, and I have the payment auto drafted from my account, and I Venmo her every month. Like, there's no sense, and we both have jobs. Like, she spends her money, I spend my money. Like that seems like the easiest circumstance, and that's what we have planned. If in the future I happen to like earn 3 times as much as she does or something, it would be weird for us to, I would be fine adjusting things a bit, but like I don't know, all the stuff that like people are like, oh well, marriage sucks because I insert trope or whatever. I'm like, yeah, then just don't do that part.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that says you have to.
Or so like marriage has these benefits. Well, like, sure, I want to claim some of those benefits for me, but I just don't want it to come along with the like, and then you are forced into this weird arrangement that took place in early agrarian societies where the expectation is like the man works and the woman stays home and takes care of the kids, so she's dependent on his finances, and that's why we do that. Doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, so we don't do that part either. Like, we didn't do our marriage isn't reading from a script. Like, I think a lot of I think there are legitimate things to poke at. Like, these are some troubles with marriage, but like they're not universal, right? You could say that of well, the problem with any. I don't know. I think you could pick apart a lot of things in society that everyone approves of and be like, well, it used to mean this 2,000 years ago, and it's like, so fucking what?
This reminds me of, I think the thing that is bugging me about, and I'm sorry about like if this is coming off as
no, you're good. My swearing,
no,
my swearing made it sound like I was annoyed, but I'm just.
No, I mean more like I realize I'm bristling at the way that the commenter wrote the comment, and it's the same thing about the other comment about hell. Haven't you ever heard of hell? Like some of these sound like, I don't know, like the analogy that I'm thinking of is, if I were like, oh, I don't want to get a dog because these reasons, and then somebody's like, why do you hate dogs? And starts telling me all the good, like things that could happen if I had a pet dog, and it's more like, whoa, like.
Well, to be fair, I think
didn't say
MQP
that I hate dogs. I'm just saying that a dog wouldn't work for me for these reasons, and like.
I think MQP was replying specifically to me, and I had said that marriage is stupid and no one should ever get one. So I was saying no one should get dogs.
I don't know.
That analogy.
Even that was probably phrasing it too strongly, and I think that like probably what you weren't trying to do was tell other people how to live their lives, but more of just like based on the bad experiences you have and like the fact that a lot of people don't think about these things or know that these are the drawbacks that you're taking on.
Yeah. Well, because previously I had said there's basically no benefits at all, and now I have to walk that back a little bit and say, okay, there is the very costly social signal and common knowledge created in the community that these people are interlinked in certain ways.
I don't know that it should mean that, though. I like...
Well, if it doesn't mean that, then you probably shouldn't have the wedding, right?
I don't know. I mean, like,
Maybe that can
Yeah,
be...
I guess another... Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Like, one of the things that is keeping me from doing a marriage is that, like, I worry about all the assumptions that people are going to make about being married and what it means.
Well, that's kind of the point. Like you're supposed to get those assumptions with the marriage. That's why you do the ritual.
Even with, like, dating somebody, everyone assumes that, like, me and Phoenix, if they, like, see us together, are an exclusive couple and that we have a particular style of relationship. And I'm just like, I don't know if you're ready to hear about how our relationship actually works or any of this, but like, just the fact that people immediately assume that, like, oh, these people are dating, and then that means that X, Y, and Z is also true. I was like, no, actually.
I think people assume that a fair bit less nowadays about people that are dating.
Certainly in our circles.
Dating market has changed a lot.
I'm just not out meeting a lot of people who tell me what they think, and if they're not telling me, there's a great chance I don't give a shit. Like, if they assume that I live in some tropey marriage where, I have to watch my step or I'm in the doghouse and, I have to do all the man chores and whatever, and she's at home, barefoot and pregnant doing the dishes. Like, all right, cool. I don't really care what you think, right? It's like...
You don't find it annoying if people do, like... I don't know, like, what if you were, like, out at a bar and you got a text from Rachel and then somebody's like, oh, is your wife texting you to come home?
I've had moments like that.
Doesn't that annoy you?
No, I
really? Or is it more that you just kind of laugh and you're like, oh, you poor fool?
It's more that, and it maybe sounds condescending, and maybe it's my, I would say it's something to do with, there's certainly fewer filters I have to go through with people because my relationship is more traditional, on its face, I guess, but like, I do have a gentler version of like, oh, you fool, you think that's what this means. I feel so bad for you. And Rachel will tell me she'll be out with her friends. They'll go out after work or something, and she like one of them has to like lie to her husband and say that they're working late because he likes that she comes home after work and whatever. And it's like, that's insane. Like, if Rachel wants to go and do whatever the hell she wants, she can do whatever the hell she wants. Like, what we do is to keep each other in the loop. Just because it's polite. If she didn't come home after work one day, I'd be really worried. But if she said, I'm going to go out with my friends and be drunk all night and get a lift home, like, go nuts, have fun, be safe. In the context where people do say those things, I have more of the, like, I'm sorry your relationship sucks response, rather than, like, I'm annoyed that you're making assumptions about me. I don't know. I'll keep my eyes peeled for any time where I feel any annoyance at these judgments, but it probably doesn't help that I rarely I don't get out that much. So
maybe it's more that, like, when I have been in relationships where it was like more I don't know, where I didn't look as queer as I do now. One thing that I remember kept coming up was like when I would change my hair, because I frequently do, or at least used to. Now I work at a hospital, I have to be more boring, but I would have, like, I don't know, fucking blue mohawk or whatever, and somebody would be like, oh man, what does your boyfriend think of that? Or like, I can't believe your boyfriend let you do that, or something like that. Like, I would get that kind of comment all the time, and I was just like, why do you think that my dating partner has anything to do with what I do to my appearance? Like, it's just such a bizarre response.
This very well might be a thing
that a way to try to police you too.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a thing that maybe impacts women and people who present as women more than
That's
men.
kind of what I was trying to get at, even though.
Yeah,
I think it's shitty on both sides, though. There's certain shitty stereotypes from both sides.
Yeah, but as far as, like,
I just don't know as many of them personally, since I've,
Yeah, I was asked once, like, when is, like, my brother-in-law asked, like, hey, when is your cousin gonna have, or your niece gonna have a cousin to play with? And I was like, not from me. Like, but I mean, he's just kind of a bro. I feel like he's just, he was reading from a script, I think, when he asked that, right? Like, I don't think that I really didn't care that he asked. That said, if I was asked every time I went out and someone saw my new wedding ring, like, oh my God, when are you guys having kids? I might eventually get annoyed at the repetitive question, but not at the the assumption on the person asking it. That said, I know Rachel will get asked once in a while, like, when are you guys having kids? And that's because she's the woman, I guess.
Yeah. She's the one that cares about babies.
And then she gets to say never, and then, like, oh my God, you'll change your mind, or oh, how come? Or, all that annoying stuff. That, again, part of my, like, social filter is that I interact with people who are, it's either people like you guys, or people like my coworkers, which are, programmer bros for the most part, or like programmer nerds. Bros, there's a bro type version, and they're not really that either.
Programmers.
So yeah, exactly. So, like, there's not a lot of, like, me running around with, like, the average person who gets their life cues from the life version of TV tropes and tries to ask you, when are you going to do this trope? So I'm subjected to it a lot less than I think many people would be. And so I can't say I wouldn't find it annoying if I was hit with it more often. But as it happens, I'm not. And my relationship's fucking dope. So, that should be how it is. Like, if the person, I've sold on this before, but, like, yeah, I don't know. Find the right person that makes you happy the right way all the time, and that's how your relationship should be. So, yeah. All right.
Let's thank our patron.
And while we're finding the list, I want to point out that because we read one of Matt's comments, I bought my wife and I, which is fun to say. I get titillated when I say wife. I bought us each copies of The Gunslinger by Stephen King because they started a new podcast recently called Kingslingers, where they're doing a kind of like a We Want More, We've Got Worm read through of it. And this time Scott is playing the Matt and Matt is playing the Scott. To make that less confusing, Scott has read the books before and Matt hasn't, so Matt's doing the blind read this time.
How far are they so far?
They're, I think, past the first book.
Oh, whoa, that was fast.
Those guys podcast too much.
Yeah, they do an episode a week, and, like, the first book's only a couple hundred pages.
So I can keep up.
So, like, it goes by pretty fast. I think they did 3 episodes for the first book, which is, not a great strategy. No, I've only listened to the intro episode because I'm only partway through the first book.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I've never read any Stephen King before, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. I didn't know anything what to expect, and it's a fantasy series. Have you read Gunslinger?
No, I haven't. I know of it.
it's interesting so far. I don't know what is going on yet, so I don't have a lot of thoughts on it.
Okay.
What I can say is that it's weird, but I think it might be in a fun kind of weird. So
I think Scott and Matt can make anything sound interesting.
I know.
I was listening to their actual like Doofcast podcast where they were talking about like it was some series of movies that I like definitely don't want to watch, but I was really enjoying hearing their analysis of it.
I remember when they talked about the Meet the Feebles, that crazy Muppet movie with the cult following, and after I heard that episode, I was like, "This sounds awesome! I kind of want to see this." And then when Matt was over at my place, or maybe it was the meetup or something, I was like, "So that Meet the Weevils was pretty good, huh?" And he was like, if you're watching it at 2x speed. I was like, oh, okay.
I think, we don't know if the person that paid them to watch that is listening to our show too.
Oh,
probably
right.
not. But
that's why I didn't point out the specific movie.
Oh, shit. I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter. I mean, so this is just going to be a fact that, and it's
like, he enjoyed it enough.
Exactly. They didn't say no, and it's just a fact that if like they have a platform where it's like you can pay us to watch stuff, they can't guarantee they'll like everything.
Right.
What they can do is they'll guarantee that they'll watch it and that they will discuss it for an hour and change,
and that they will say the things they did like about it.
Yes, which I think is really like an asset.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Like,
I do think they mostly shit on Madoka Magica, which I found really funny, even though
Really?
I like Madoka Magica.
I love it. Oh, okay. But was that because Scott hates all anime?
Yeah, but I mean, there was also a bunch of things that they pointed out, like even not like coming from as much of maybe an anime background, like Matt found it to be really creepy how like you were supposed to be, I guess, like to find these like prepubescent girls sexualized, like being kind of attractive or like okay.
Oh,
where
having
having young daughters was kind of like,
Yeah. No, I mean, I on the one hand, I sort of agree with him. On the other hand, there's a whole cultural thing.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, watching that, I didn't even, like, I was like, yeah, Sayaka's bae or whatever, but it's just, like, when you actually, like, oh, these are supposed to represent, like, actual prepubescent humans. I don't even think of that. Anime characters are just fantasy characters. Like,
right.
they're not real.
I think I need to keep making that shift. Like, most anime I consume doesn't really have a lot of minors in it, so that's fine. Or if they do, they're not doing sex stuff. But like,
I'm literally watching a show right now, an anime show that is about minors doing sex stuff.
Weird.
What is it?
It's so you gotta push through like how gross that aspect of it is.
Well, no, because that is like the focus of the show. It's so I'm only on episode 3. I was just sold on it at our last meetup by 2 people we know. I don't know if it's okay to say their names, but it's called Darling in the Franxx.
Oh, okay, I've seen that whole thing. I enjoy that one a lot.
Yeah, I'm only on episode 3, and I was like, oh, so when they were telling me about it, they were like, oh yeah, the girls are bent over in their tight bodysuits, haha, anime. And I'm like, oh, this is literally about sexual trauma being inflicted on minors. Holy fuck.
Yeah, well, Gainax does a good job with that kind of thing, though.
Yeah.
That
Like,
sounds
they-
interesting.
Is this isn't Gainax, is it?
Or Trigger. It's
I think it was
it's either
Trigger.
Gainax or it's Trigger, which is an offshoot of Gainax.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But yeah, I mean, they're all about deconstructing the tropes of anime anyway. So like the fact that like they do pose them in these weird provocative and they have these weird outfits, they keep making a bunch of jokes about it, but then eventually like the story gets darker and like you realize that like
episode 2. That's. I mean, I guess it's gonna get even
no,
darker.
it gets even
but-
darker.
Okay, yeah.
I'm curious to hear how you react to some things now that I know you're watching that.
Yeah. No, I saw episode 2, and at first I was like, this is fucked up, and then I saw episode 3, and I was like, it's more fucked up than I
It keeps
thought.
getting fucked up.
Okay.
And this was recommended by somebody who didn't watch Game of Thrones because they didn't like the incest.
No, I watched it.
No, this was recommended by somebody.
Oh, that's a good point. That's weird.
Huh.
Maybe they were tricked into it because they love anime and then didn't.
Well, I think the thing is, it's not like this anime is pro like traumatizing minors with sex things.
Yeah, but I don't think that Game of Thrones is really pro incest either.
Yeah, but it's not anti-incest.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is kind of like
It's not about specifically tackling the topic.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is
Well, I
yeah.
don't think you're supposed to take away from it that like incest is sometimes cool.
Right, but it's not
Like-
all about like processing the trauma of an
Game
incest
of Thrones tends
relationship.
not to make value judgments about like the stuff that it does, to the point where
Right.
I remember that I was actually pretty annoyed by like a bunch of the rape scenes because it was
Here's
like,
some rape.
yeah, like
We're
they
not gonna
keep
judge.
kind of like throwing it in your face and like trying to be like, we're Game of Thrones, we're shocking and adult, and I'm like, I get it, like can we get back to the plot now and stop just like kind of like sexualizing these rape scenes? Like okay, we're supposed to like maybe feel bad for these characters or feel like, oh, this is just a fictional thing that's happening in this universe where this might happen, but then I'm like, okay, you keep doing it in a way that's making me feel kind of gross.
Also, so whoever feels weird and gross right now, remember at the start of the very positive push for the Kingslingers podcast. So people should check that out. I'm looking forward to it. And
which is not at all written by a horror writer, so there will definitely be no violence or rape.
I don't know what there will be in it, but
Okay.
I mean,
I haven't read it. I'm sure there's going to be violence. I assume there's going to be some sort of sexual stuff.
the guy's called the gunslinger.
Right.
I mean, if he doesn't shoot that gun at somebody at some point, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. So.
Right.
The Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gunslinger.
So yeah, I mean, let's be real. There'll be violence, but
the podcast will be positive.
Yeah, everything on Doof Media is great.
Hey,
We are not sponsored by Doof Media.
No. Have we thanked a patron yet?
No,
we haven't.
Maybe we should do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead of pimping Doof Media, we will pimp ourselves. Is it my turn?
Sure.
Okay.
It can be your turn.
Crow Moore is a patron of ours. He has brought this episode to you, and we thank him very much. What was it we were talking about at the very beginning of the episode?
Coronavirus?
How are we going to tie this in? There was some kind of
about raising our social capital or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah. The moment has passed.
That's all right.
Sorry about that, Crow Moore. Crow Moore, thank you. You're awesome. And thank you to all of our patrons who helped bring this to you guys. And we really appreciate it.
And sorry that we were like really off topic this time a lot.
That's true.
We hadn't seen each other in a while.
Yeah. But I had a great time, and thank you again to Crow Moore and everyone else who makes the show possible and gives us nice new equipment to keep things sounding nice and crisp.
Yeah.
And
can increase our social capital by telling friends about our episode or rating or reviewing us, and in whatever system you get the podcast from. We also have a subreddit that you can take part in at the r/the Bayesian Conspiracy, or a Discord that is linked to on our website, the BayesianConspiracyPodcast.com.
That's right.
Yeah. So lots of good stuff there.
Awesome.
Cool. That's it.
We've been talking for so long.
Yeah. All right.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.